I've been asked in the past whether I've ever considered commentating one of my own games, and up to this point, my answer has pretty solidly been no. I've looked into it, but my general feeling on the matter is if you're commentating your own game, you're far more likely to include a bit of revisionism here and there. Like, remember things a little bit differently to how they happened, and I really want to portray the game as accurately as possible. But there is one way around this, and that way is commentating a game I'm currently in. I've just joined a game for the first time in almost a year, this is currently in spring 1901. I'm going to be giving my thoughts on this game as we go through it. So that revisionism shouldn't be there. You'll be able to hear what I'm thinking of as I'm going through the game, and hopefully it turns out well for me. I guess you'll see sooner than I will. So let's jump right in here. I've drawn Turkey. I'm not a big Turkey fan. I don't like being stuck in the corner. I know it's a very strong defensive nation, but I like having more options. I like being able to do more with my moves early on. And as Turkey, as you can see, I've already got my orders entered here. There's not really a lot you can do differently. You can go to Constantinople with the fleet if you trust Russia. You can go to Armenia with the army if you want to go really anti-Russia straight away. But generally speaking, you're fixed to a couple of movesets, and you can't do a lot of interesting things. I've got this moveset in just as a default order set at the moment. I may change it, but we'll have to see how things evolve with the other players. And I have been messaging people, and I'm going to show you some of those messages. I hope the other players are okay with this. To give you an example of what my press is like and what the press I'm receiving is like, so you can understand my perspective on everything, which is why I was so zoomed in initially. Let's go back to that zoom level and have a quick look at someone who initially doesn't seem to matter as much to Turkey. England. England is a power that, obviously, as Turkey, you can't do very much with. They're on this side of the board, you're over here. Not a lot of collaboration you can do, except maybe like joint attack on Russia at the same time, but then you're just weakening him from your respective sides. You're not actually interacting very much. Still, the press is important. The reason for that is that information sharing is key in diplomacy. The people on the other side of the board might be hearing things that are extremely relevant to your position, and if they like you, they're more likely to give you that information. So, hello, how are you? That's perfectly fine opening from England, I think. You wouldn't be expecting much more from a power on the other side of the board this early on. You see, I open up with a little bit more enthusiasm, a little bit more of a in-depth message, and this is what my opening press generally looks like. It's a bit more detailed with my neighbouring powers. Open up with a sort of friendly hello, howdy fellow corner power. It's more of a casual sort of, hi, I'd like to get to know you feel. Then a talking point. I'm not really thrilled about drawing Turkey because there's so much of the board I'm never going to see. This was my initial thought going into the game. I figured it's a good starting talking point for conversations, so I might as well include it. And then a quick question to make sure to make the message as easy to respond to as possible, to get that rapport going between the two of you. Because it's quite easy for countries on the other side of the board to burn out, to just stop talking to you. Especially if you send the sort of closed message like, I hope we can work together later on in the game, for example. If you send that kind of message, there's a good chance you're never going to talk to them again until like 1906, 1907, and by that time it's too late. They've decided, you're not my ally. I'm going to do what I can to stop you getting the solo instead of collaborating with you. So, as you can see, I haven't really sent more messages. This was quite early in the day, my time. I will get onto that a bit later. But I think this is a decent opening rapport with England. I've got similar things going with Germany and France. Germany, a lot more information, to be honest. If you want to, you can pause the video to read any of this. I'm just going to skip through it for the most part. This is the interesting line here. I think I made friends enough to Germany, that he was willing to do things directly for me if I really wanted him to. Also, I told Austria I was chatting with you and would pass along useful information to him. I'm open to passing along deceptive information if you want. That's amazing. That's a great start. Obviously, Germany could be lying here. He could just be wanting to be able to pass info to Austria about what I'm actually doing. I'm kind of fine with that, but the main thing I'm taking away from this is Germany kind of wants to be my friend, kind of wants to get a good start to the game, and I've made enough of a connection with him right off the bat that he's willing to put that into action. And that should help quite a lot later in the game. Maybe even already. We'll see. As you can see, I said I wouldn't need it. I think being honest early on is usually the best approach. So I actually really like Austria from my opening convo with him, so I don't think deceptive information is even necessary. And then some stuff about what I could potentially be doing. Telling someone on the other side of the board what you're doing, not always the best idea, but in this case I feel like I've built up enough of a friendship with Germany that he probably won't spill it to Italy or Russia. And if he does spill it to Austria, I'm pretty happy with that, because Austria will think, I can trust Turkey. That's great. France I'm going to skip, it's pretty similar on that note. I'm going to move to Russia, and Russia's press is interesting. As you can see, I opened up with a pretty standard opening message from my perspective. Got that sort of casual vibe going. Got a sort of suggestion that RT can be quite a strong alliance, but not outright proposing anything just yet, because if you propose an alliance, immediately people will think you're proposing alliances to everyone immediately, and won't particularly trust you. I've got the talking point, pretty sad I drew pretty sad I drew Turkey, not much of a fan of playing corner powers. Is Russia a country you enjoy much? And his response. No particularly, but it's okay. That was a bit of a disappointing response. I mean, you should be able to see that pretty easily from my reaction to the other messages, but this is a neighbouring power who I need to establish a connection with to have an option of working with them. A one-line message that gives me nothing, no way to respond to it, doesn't really expand on anything, doesn't propose anything, doesn't even continue the conversation in any real way, is really disappointing. So I tried to push a little bit further. How are you feeling about the opening here? I was thinking maybe he's not into just general talking, maybe he wants to go straight into the game. Have you thought about how you'd like to open yet? Are you waiting on messages before that? I'm going to wait a tad. Nothing more yet. How am I supposed to work with this? That's my problem. You really need to put more detail into those messages if you're going to be responding to a neighbour. If this was talking to England, I'd be okay with it, but Russia? Well, I've sent them a message about the Black Sea. I'm trying to force out a more immediate response, like a more detailed response, or at least relevant to what I'm doing. But I'm already quite disappointed in this message, and I feel like Russia probably will not be my ally in this game as a result. It's difficult to work with someone when they just give you press like that. You can absolutely work with them still, but it's hard to tell when they're going to stab you, when they're being genuine, what they want to do, if they're not going to give you any details. So off the bat, my consideration is I'm probably not going to go for a Juggernaut. Now, the other two important ones here are Italy and Austria. So Austria was the first person I talked to here. As you can see, pretty standard opening from him, not a lot talking about it. I opened with saying, I'm someone who considers that AT might work, because Austria-Turkey is this sort of boogeyman in people's minds that never works and that should be discarded from consideration. I'm trying to get him on board with the idea. Maybe it is a possibility, because options are always good. Especially when they benefit me. Then I talk a little bit about not having heard from anyone. I don't think I gave him a question, but there's enough in this message for him to respond to. And he's also saying stuff like, yeah, Austria-Turkey works. It can work, I'm prepared to do it. That's good to hear. Obviously he'd be saying that regardless, but at least the message is there. Right? Russia says he wants Romania. Maybe you can leverage that and snag the Black Sea this spring. Russia always wants Romania, so that's a little bit, that was a little bit redundant, but something I wanted to ask him: did Russia say he wanted Romania in the spring? If Russia is going to Romania in the spring, that's amazing for me, and it's something I absolutely want to know. It's great to get it off of Austria this early, because if Russia says it, then I've got some collaboration on the two. I know it's probably true. He's mentioned it quite violently in both terse responses I've gotten from him, and this sort of matches up with the vibe I'm getting from Russia at the moment, with the feeling that he's not someone who really wants to talk to people, he's someone who's just saying what he wants to say and then going. So I think this is probably true. Italy hasn't responded to me yet, but I assume he'll want to attack you eventually like any good Italy. That's a bit of a... I'll let that one go. It doesn't feel great. He's not asking me to go full aggro, like an Armenia opening, but it's worth thinking about. I do think it's worth thinking about, but it is a bit too committal for me off the bat. I'm probably not going to go with it, just because it ties me into this potential alliance with Austria. From Russia with regard to Romania, I take now. Direct quotes, always great. You can look at them and say, does that match what I'm hearing from the person? Does that match the sort of tone? Absolutely. So I have a feeling that's probably true. Here, he's also saying now, yes, he's finally heard from Italy. He wants to pick up Tunis in 1902. Says he wants to work with me in the Balkans. I'll stand him out of Greece all day. This is something I'm going to have to look at my Italy conversation for, because I do have a little bit from Italy here. Oh, I just got a message from Russia. Nice to see. So Italy was a bit late to the table. As you can see here, 8:30 AM, the messages, we were all talking at like 2 AM. Italy is in my top 2 fit countries to play as. This really isn't very much, this is just getting the conversation going. I'm talking about other players. I'm giving the first bit of information here to try and prompt him to give his information as well. I also gave that line to Italy from Austria just to say, you know, this is what Austria is telling me about you already. You might want to be a little bit wary of him, and, you know, I'm being honest. Trust me. As Italy, I'm obviously most afraid of a snowballing Austria, so trying to defeat him is always the first priority. Now, I'm a little bit suspicious of this message. I think plenty of Italy's aren't really too afraid of a snowballing Austria, they're more afraid of a juggernaut, and will Lepanto in. But since this guy has talked to Russia, he may be aware that Russia isn't the sort of person I'd want to work with. So we've got to keep that in mind. He does also say it's a bit hard to gain foot in the Balkans without support. He seems to have this fixation on getting into the Balkans. He sort of expands on it down here. I might be able to get Austria's approval in Greece, but not sure yet. Would be a very rare game if I could get into Greece, with both Austria and Turkey supporting it, but I'm going to wait to see what he says. The important thing here is that he's talking about getting into Greece already. Up here he's talking about getting into the Balkans, and in Austrian message from earlier, here, he says he wants to work with me in the Balkans, and he wants to pick up Tunis in 1902, so this is verifying what Italy has said to me. He's really fixated on getting into the Balkans, and an Italy who wants to be in the Balkans is usually not a friend of Austria. I'm pretty happy with that. He offered to DMZ Ven/Tree, and I pretty much told him I need to expand into the Balkans as I will have nowhere else to go. This is all sounding very good for me. It's sounding like Italy and Austria are not going to be particularly compatible here. And that's great for a Turkey who's not going to work with Russia. Because my biggest concern would be Italy and Austria ganging up on me. I'm not sure which of the two to choose yet, but I'm going to hold off on that decision for now. But I think it's definitely going to be one of Italy or Austria, just because Russia's messages are not really indicating to me that he's going to be a good ally. Let's just have a look at the Russian message here before I cut. I would like to keep it open for obvious reasons. Okay. That's not helpful. But, I mean, well, it verifies that he's going to Romania, but it's not like asking me to not go there. He's not giving me any sort of requests. He's not talking to me about his reasoning at all. He's just saying for obvious reasons. None of this is stuff I like. Anyway, let's switch over to the backstabber tab here. So, what am I thinking right now? Well, Trieste Ven was something suggested by the Austrian. He said he might hedgehog if he thinks Italy is going north. I don't think he thinks Italy is going north, so this is much more likely to come down to Albania. Budapest to Serbia is pretty much always guaranteed. Vienna to Galicia is very, very likely given that the Russian is being so terse with him. Sevastopol to Romania is something I've heard from both Russia and Austria, so I think I can put it in safely. The Italian moves, these two are usually fairly obvious, but it's also very possible that Rome comes up here and Venice goes to Piedmont, sort of Alpine chicken, if he's wanting to go for Greece, because fleeting Greece can work fine. The other thing to consider is that Austria did suggest demilitarizing both of these, in which case Rome has to go to Apulia, and Venice goes either to Piedmont or to Tyrolia. Tyrolia is kind of out of it if he wants to work with Austria. I don't think Austria would be happy about that. And Germany seems to be a good player from a negotiation standpoint, so I don't think he'd want that either. So this is what I'd expect from the Italian here. We'll see how accurate that is. What's happening over here? This is the other relevant bit to me. Obviously, St. Petersburg probably to the Gulf of Bothnia. Now, either this is what's going to happen, and 3 units on Romania, or Russia is going to go north, like that. I think the much more likely outcome is this, or this, maybe, even. This would be a lot better for me if I open up it with an anti-Russia start, because I'd be able to guarantee taking one of them as long as Austria doesn't support it. But I'm still leaning towards going with a more standard opening, this one specifically, just to keep my options a bit open. If I'm going to upset Russia anyway by going into the Black Sea, maybe this is the best plan. But we'll see. It's worth considering, actually. Maybe this is the best plan if Russia is going to declare war on me if I go to the Black Sea. But I don't like committing to something like that while there's still the possibility of Austria-Italy alliance on the table. So I think I'm probably going to stick to this one. I don't think this is a good move for that sort of thing, even though Black Sea is being demilitarized, just because this is so obviously anti-Italy. I think Italy's likely to align with Austria and just say screw Turkey from then on. So we'll see how that goes. I'll join you all later. Okay, howdy all. It's a bit of a late night update from me, but as you can see the phase has progressed. It is now autumn 1901. And what a spring that was, I can tell you. As you can see, I did make an adjustment to my strategy after the last update. I decided to open to Armenia, open very anti-Russian. The reason for that was I really didn't hear anything else from Russia for the entirety of that phase. I was pretty committed at that point to not really wanting this alliance with Russia. And I figured it would make a bit of an interesting start if I decided to open in a more unconventional way, let's say. it may well have come back to bite me immediately. We'll talk about that in a second. The other thing that happened at the end of the last phase was I was playing Austria and Italy off against each other a little bit. Italy was insisting on getting Greece. I was talking to Austria about that, and talking to Italy about that, and sort of trying to send messages to both that indicated that the other was being antagonistic about it. Which they were, both of them were sort of against each other, but I tried to raise that tension a little bit, and that may have also bitten me in the back. This is something I do a little bit too much, lying to two different people, or not exactly lying, telling two different people slightly different stories, because they'll probably talk to each other and figure out that story is that I'm the one initiating those. Which may have been what happened here, it may have not been. I can't really tell at the moment, but we'll talk about what I think is going on here in a second. First off, let's have a look at the messages I've had this round. Okay, so Austria's immediately saying, I'm not going to accuse you of leaking the gambit to Italy, but FML lol. This is a reference to him saying that he's going to go with the Balkan gambit, which is the opening he played, as you can see, to Serbia, Albania and Galicia, and Italy followed him into Trieste. I knew he was going to play this. He's saying he's not accusing me of leaking it, but he's annoyed that Italy got in, obviously. He's saying, once I've assured you're not trying to screw me for Italy, which I'm sure you're not, I don't think I want to change anything. I'll take the home centre loss and 3 builds any day. That said, I'm going to need Romania and Greece now. And the rest of this discussion is basically discussion on what strategy we would need to take to get him Romania and Greece. That's something... Well, it's something we can do relatively easily, as you can see with this sandbox here. If I need to remember what the support button is. There, yep. Alright, if I do that, there's no way Russia can hold Romania, because the only way you can counter a 3-pronged attack like this is either by cutting the support, nothing to cut the support, supporting it hold with 2 units, there's no 2 units on Romania, or supporting the other way, and this is a fleet, so it can't move to Galicia. However, this seems a little dumb to me, because obviously I'd be giving up Sevastopol doing so. I would not get this, I'd get the 1 build here, and he's taking Greece in the same turn, so I don't really get anything else at that apart from an alliance with him. That's not even the only reason behind my unsureness about going with this. And we'll talk about what Italy said to me. Alright, so amazing turn. Greece should easily be taken now, and I can take a centre off of Austria. And Sevastopol looks very likely to be taken too. I don't think this could have gone any better for us. Also, AR looks super unlikely, even with communication between the two, with a pretty open fight over Galicia. I think that's pretty reasonable. The AR looks very unlikely. He's obviously playing up the fact that he's anti-Austria here. Which, looking at the moves on the map here, you can see Venice to Trieste looks anti-Austria, but at the same time he's sent Rome to Naples. And you'd think if he was truly planning to be anti-Austria, he would have sent Rome up to Venice just to make sure he had the support in place, he had the backup to attack further. Sure, you can go in for the 1 centre attack here, but what are you intending to get out of that? He's talking about still wanting to get Greece. It seems pretty difficult. He could cut Serbia and then convoy over. Maybe that's what he's intending. Actually, thinking about it, that is probably what he's indicating with his message. But here's the big thing from me. This opening looks very, very similar to a legendary opening known as the Key Lepanto. And let's have a look at what the Key Lepanto means. Let's just set these units back to hold a second. Right? As you would imagine from a Turkey in this position, Turkey is probably going to want to do something around Sevastopol, around Romania. They're not going to be particularly interested in Greece. If they are, they're probably going to be supporting someone else into Greece because they've not been offered any support in themselves. So let's assume I'm doing the moves Austria wants me to do. Like so. This is double supporting him in Galicia to Romania. We can assume that he's going to move Galicia to Romania because there's not really a ton else to do with that unit. But now look at the rest of the board here, right? Let's assume that Italy is on Austria's side. What can they do here? Well, they can do this. Right. And here we go. We've got Trieste moving to Serbia, Serbia moving down to Greece, and Naples going across to Tunis. This allows them to conquer not only both of these centres, it also allows them to conquer Romania, and it gets the Italian unit out of the Austrian Home Supply Centre immediately and into combat. I'm completely surrounded, Russia is fairly screwed, I'm pretty screwed, and the Austria-Italy has the momentum, they're ready to steamroll. I'm really scared about this. It's a hard opening to pull off, and it's very possible they're not even trying to pull this off. It's possible that I'm overthinking everything. But as long as this is a possibility, I want to play to counter it. So my thinking is this. Obviously, Austria is going to be annoyed at me. There's no way Austria is not annoyed at me if I don't support him through Romania, but he's probably still going to enter this. What else does this achieve? Well, I'm probably going to get into Sevastopol. The only way to counter me getting into Sevastopol here is to order Romania back with support from Ukraine. I would expect a good player to do this. I think any good Russian player, or any high-level Russian player, would see this counter and would enter it. However, I think this Russian player is more likely to do this. Either that or that. Right, because this Russian player has not been sending very many messages. They've sort of been giving off the impression that they're new to the game, and I think that's probably the correct impression. They're either new to the game or a gunboat player. Gunboat player will obviously be a little bit smarter in the moves than this, but let's assume it's like this. We've got the cut in from Galicia, which means this should get into Sevastopol. I'll pick up the build here. I'll pick up the build from Bulgaria, and this will bounce the unit in Trieste, which bounce the Trieste units move to Serbia if he's trying to do this, which means this ends up holding, and Austria loses the centre here, only picks up Greece, which means he doesn't even get to build, these remain empty. From there, it shouldn't be too hard to convince Italy to work with me. We'll be the two dominant powers of the south, and we should be able to carve up this peninsula if we want to. No, my main objective right now is to keep Italy on side. Make sure I'm not lying to Italy with what I'm saying. I'm talking to him about potential options here. I might not raise that I'm going to Serbia, but I think I can get away with not raising that I'm going to Serbia and still keep him on side. We'll have to see how that pans out. Other side of the board, not a huge amount of interesting stuff here. There's a lot of excitement about Russia not getting any builds. I think it's probably going to lead to an England-Germany alliance. But for now, not a huge amount to talk about up there. It's going to be dangerous if Russia doesn't get on the board at all up here, but I don't think there's a lot we can do about that. So, I'm going to leave you there, because it's quite late at night, as you can see from the system clock down here, and I've got a lecture in the morning, so I'll update you either later in this phase or on the next phase. I'm back, still full 1901, as you can see, it's 1 o'clock the following day. Still got another 9 hours until things process. I've been talking to people, but that wasn't really what I'm going to talk about here. I wanted to talk about some of the moves that I didn't really think to talk about last night, but that I was still considering in setting up my counter. So, First off, what do I think they're doing if they're telling me the truth, if they're not actually kilopantoing? Obviously, Austria is still going to be doing this. He thinks he's getting support into Romania, he wants to take that. That would just be fantastic for him if he does get in. So I think we can lock in that the Galicia army is going here no matter what. What else would be the case? Austria is probably supporting Albania through to Serbia, through to Greece even, because there's no point dislodging the Italian unit from Trieste. There's nothing really going on here. If you manage to knock the Italian unit out, all you've done is not get this build down here, and he can just retreat to one of these two provinces. Even if Galicia covered one of them, unless Trieste bounced him there. No, even if Trieste bounced him there, he could just retreat to the other one. So I think that Austria is guaranteed to do this move. Now, Italy has told me he's going to try and convoy into Greece, and he hasn't asked for my support. He says he thinks he can get in there by himself, which leads me to believe they're trying to kilopanto even more, because I think that's ludicrous. You would never expect to get into Greece with no support as Italy, unless he's expecting Austria to do this. Which, as I said, seems somewhat pointless. But if that is the case, if he is convoying over here, then my move from Bulgaria to Serbia should be even more effective, because it will make both of them bounce out of Greece here. I'll be taking Sevastopol, I'll be taking Bulgaria, Austria will get no builds here, Italy will get one build, but Naples will be occupied. So that's like best case scenario for me, aside from the fact I would immediately be seen as the most powerful nation on the board. The other thing I wanted to discuss is an opening I've seen a few times at a high level. I don't think you would think to play it at the level that this game is at, but it's still a possibility in my mind, and that's the accelerated kilopanto. The interesting thing about the accelerated kilopanto is that Trieste army doesn't actually move. There's no point in getting it into Serbia in this case, because the main reason you would want to get it into Serbia is to make sure you don't take the Austrian home supply centre. And why would you want that as Austria-Italy? Well, when you think about it from a high level of play, Austria doesn't really need Trieste in an Austria-Italy alliance. It helps Austria, sure, but it also sort of makes them both less likely to trust each other. If you can successfully take Trieste off of Austria as an agreed move, and then move this back, and sort of leave this open, it means Austria can't build fleets, and their first point of attack on Italy will have to be to Trieste, which means they won't be able to build any fleets until the year after they've stabbed, at least. That really makes the Austria-Italy alliance a lot more stable. It also means that if Italy moves back to Venice from Trieste and keeps this demilitarized, Italy's got a lot further to go to stab Austria. They've got to move back through to Trieste or move to Tyrolia, and they're not actually gaining anything when they walk into Trieste. They're not taking an Austrian unit off the board because that centre has already switched places. So why would you want to do this, aside from that? Why would you want to just give up that centre as Austria? Because giving up a home supply centre is a big deal. Even if it makes your alliance a bit more stable, it is giving Italy a big advantage over you. So the main reason people usually do it is to accelerate the Lepanto. Specifically, with Ionian to Aegean. Ionian to Aegean is a really strong move this early, because Turkey rarely gets two builds. They're probably only going to get one. It's going to be Fleet Smyrna, and then if you still got your fleet in the Ionian, you have a guessing game between Aegean and Eastern Med as to which centre you're going to bounce them out of. If the second Turkish fleet comes through to the front here, and then gets out, then it means that Turkey can bounce both of these from then on, and stop you ever getting in, as long as you miss the first move. So you've got a 50-50 on not really getting anywhere. If you go in the spring, there's absolutely nothing Turkey can do against you unless they move to Constantinople in the very first turn, which obviously I haven't. The Downside to this is that obviously you don't get the build from Tunis, but in this case it's being replaced by the build from Trieste. Also in this case, the Italian army would have to move up to Apulia so that the new fleet could be built, but that's a pretty easy thing to do. So what have I done to protect against this? I don't think this is happening. I don't think these players are thinking along these lines. But if they do it, I think the move to Sevastopol sort of counters it. Specifically because I'm getting Bulgaria, I'm getting Sevastopol, hopefully, unless Russia does that, which, as mentioned, I don't think he's doing. And with 2 builds, I can stick 2 fleets down here and immediately knock him out of the Aegean Sea. That's not something you'd usually be able to do as Turkey, but it's a solid counter. Black Sea would still be able to hold Bulgaria. Obviously that leaves Sevastopol in a bit of a bad spot, but Sevastopol should be able to hold its own. This Russia will have problems in Romania anyway. Warsaw, unless it moves to Moscow this turn, is going to have to spend 1 turn moving into place before it can knock anything out of Sevastopol. So, it certainly wouldn't be an ideal situation, but I think I'd be able to hold out against this. The downside to these moves, obviously I'm sort of throwing Russia under the bus and saying I don't want you as an ally, which is not a great thing to do when you're faced with an Austria and Italy alliance. But at the same time, I don't think I'd be able to coordinate well with this Russia. I think those supply centers are better under my control. It's a very greedy way to look at the game, but it probably works out, so we'll see. I am trying to blame Austria for my moves against Russia here, and I'm going to try and blame him again for that next turn, saying that he fed me false information. I don't think that will work for very long, but it's worth a shot. That's pretty much all I have to say. I will be back, hopefully. I think the next video will be Spring 1902, because there's not really much left to talk about this one. But it's an interesting position, and I'm glad I chose this game to commentate. Interesting happenings here. As you can see, 15 minutes to the deadline. I did have the orders I suggested put in until a couple of minutes ago. Throughout the duration of the phase, I've been getting more and more convinced that this isn't a Kilopanto happening. The stories that Italy and Austria are telling me, or at least the way they're presenting it, it feels far too strange to be made up. Like, Italy talking about wanting Greece so much, that just seems like a really, really weird thing to do. Trying to insist that he's going to get Greece, I feel like it's just... there are just easier stories they could go with if they were actually intending to do that. And I'm getting good vibes from Austria's press. I think... don't know how well you can read this here. I was trying to come up with excuses and sort of a way to play it off that I was stabbing him so that I could get back in his good books on the next phase potentially. So you can see here I was just saying, I heard from France that you were going to Kilopanto me, but I've actually reconsidered a few minutes later and thought, I'm actually not going to stab him, I'm going to stick with him. And the reason is this message here, to be honest, is what got me. If he's lying, this is the best way to get into my heart, because I felt so bad for him reading this message about to be stabbed. I really want to work with him. Like, I feel like I've connected with him quite a lot over the course of this, and while Italy is my better partner from the board position, I really like just the press Austria is giving me. It's all pretty great. I've pretended to be a little bit less experienced than I am. I said I hadn't heard of the Kilopanto, even though clearly I have. He just seems to be putting a lot more effort into it than I was expecting, and I really want to reward that. He feels like someone I could go the distance with. So I've made that change to my orders. 12 minutes remaining. As you can see from the preview here, I am now supporting Galicia into Romania. I'm not supporting him from Black Sea as well, because I have received news from Russia that he intends to cover Sevastopol, So this will be all that's necessary there. But that does mean he should be able to get Greece and Romania both. So I'm being a little bit less of the villain than I was initially planning to be. I really hope this works out. I really hope they're not Keeler-Pantoing me. But at the end of the day, I think having an ally that you like is the most important thing in the game. Having an ally you feel you can work with that closely, you feel that you can trust and that you talk with well, that's the sort of thing that can carry you through the game. And that's my plan with Austria here. I'll talk to you again in a little bit. We'll see how this phase plays out. Okay, and here we are. Builds 1901. It went okay. I think the last minute change was definitely worthwhile. As you can see here, I'll quickly switch over to the backstabber version of this because I think it's easier to see. I had completely discounted the fact that this was a fleet and could move to the Black Sea, which was obviously what happened, and he cut the support for Armenia to Sevastopol, so I did not get my second build that I was counting on. Thankfully, Austria is very happy with me for doing this, and Austria seems to be completely on board for going forward with me in this game, which I'm very happy about because I like him and I am happy to have him as an ally. As you can see here, bounce out in Greece. The Italian unit staying in Naples is amazing for me because it means no potential fleet build here, no Italy coming in through here, and Italy is understandably not amazingly happy about me having done this, considering I was talking about how I didn't particularly want to work with Austria to him. He's not cut me off entirely yet, but we'll have to see how much he's going to buy from me going forward. I don't ultimately want to work with him, but I do want to keep him on board in case I do need to make adjustments, or in case I can use that to sort of get an advantage in the war against him. As you can see in the west here, France got a huge start. Ridiculously good start. Portugal, Spain and Munich plus England and Germany bounced each other out of Holland for some reason. I have no idea on that front. Talk to England, he seems to be a bit of a less experienced player, but I've been already trying to push him towards potentially going after France here. As you can see, Russia got bounced out of Sweden, which is fantastic for me. No strong Russia being able to build in the south. Russia does actually get a build because this fleet was disbanded, but it's net even. The only thing that's going to happen is likely an army will be put in Sevastopol. That's something I did want to talk about while I'm talking here. This does lead me quite well into something I wanted to talk about, which is my general playstyle early in the game. I am going to try and convince Russia to put a unit in St. Petersburg. He probably won't buy that, he almost certainly won't buy that, but it's worth a shot. The reason I say it's worth a shot is often if you're alienating another player, the more you lie to them, the more you repeatedly lie to them, the more you're sort of trading off your ability to work with them later in the game. Because if you lie and lie and lie and try and get them to do something that's not in their interest and then stab them in the back once they do it and so on and so forth, obviously they're not going to be happy about doing anything you say later on. On the other hand, you do get that immediate advantage from it, of if they buy this, I can push. Or if they buy this and he builds a unit up here instead of down here, suddenly I've got the momentum. And momentum is a huge part of the way I play this game. I subscribe to the philosophy, in general, particularly in lower level games, that if someone is dead, they can't retaliate. That's my goal here, to try and kill off the other players that I'm not working with as fast as possible. And provided I can manage to pull that off and take them completely out of the game, it doesn't matter how much I lie to them in the meantime. If I can make Russia build up here, for example, that will be so much of an immediate advantage that I could potentially just negate any downside to him hating me. Just wipe him off the board, and suddenly the fact that he might want revenge doesn't matter anymore. It's not a good idea to do this in a high-level game, mainly because it will take a while to push through, and better players are better at negotiating with your allies, getting them to turn on you, The whole situation is a lot more fluid, and you want everyone to be your potential ally. But in a game like this, I think I can get away with it. And I think it will give me enough of an advantage that it's definitely worth it, at least on the Russian front. Maybe on the Italian front later in the game, we'll see about that. A key aspect to it is having someone on your side, and that's why Austria being allied to me is so important here. You can't really play the momentum game unless you're in a solid alliance, because you don't have the units to press that to the extent that you need to. So maybe later in the game you can play the momentum game, but I'm talking about early on. We've got between us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 centres right now. And that's 8 units we can use to smash Russia out of the game. If I was playing with just my 4 and just this tiny bit here, maybe I could take Sevastopol by lying to him, and then he's safe and sound in St. Petersburg, Warsaw and Moscow, and I've probably cost myself more by lying to him so much than I have by taking the centre. So that pretty much wraps up my strategy for the immediate future. I'm going to try and push into Russia. I'm going to try and get what I can from him. Going to build a fleet down here in Smyrna, and probably just move it to Aegean and help Austria here. It's gonna be a little dicey early on as we try and fight off the Italian over here. But hopefully the fact that England and Germany now have huge incentive to team up on France will balance that out and make sure the West is in chaos for long enough for us to push through there. I think that's everything for now. I'll talk to you again next phase. Alright, it's currently quite a few turns later, as you can see from the date down here. I will be going through each one by one, but at the moment talking in the past tense. Sorry for missing a few live, had a bit of a busy week. Anyway, to jump right into it here, as you can see I ended up building Fleet Smyrna. Russia went with Army Moscow, which is probably the best build here. It is capable of defending St. Petersburg, it's capable of defending Sevastopol. It's perfect for flexibility reasons. As you can see, Austria went with Army Vienna, and Italy with Army Venice. That's to be expected here. They're planning to go to war with each other. Both were at this point expecting my support to some degree, although Italy was understandably not happy with the fact that I'd supported Austria into Romania here. On the French front, this is the important build. The one in Brest and the one in London here. There's a very clear England-France alliance, just signalled by that build. Obviously, it was also signalled by the fact that England bounced in Holland, but the thing is, it's a continued alliance at this point, and that's dangerous because France already has some quite significant momentum here, and I don't want the West to be resolved before our side is. Germany's build was obvious here. Anyway, I'm going to move along to the next phase, which I haven't entered the moves from yet, because I want to talk about what went on during it. Now, with the Russian, I had some conversation with him. I still think he's not used to press games, but I think he's a better player than I initially gave him credit for. I think he's more of a gunboat player than anything. Those messages still weren't really giving me much. I think he and I both knew we were going to be at war, and there wasn't really much point in talking. The important negotiations here were with Austria and Italy. Now, with Austria, it was mostly planning, it was mostly talking about what we should do here, and that was all honest, because I really like Austria, I want to continue working with Austria. With Italy, it was a little bit more touch and go. That touches on a point I want to talk about here, which is, how do you talk to a player you've just stabbed? Because really, I had just stabbed Italy here. I'd been talking to him about attacking Austria, and then suddenly I'd supported Austria into Romania, and then I built Fleet Smyrna, and there's sort of this feeling there of, what do I talk to him about? What do I say? And I talked previously, when I was talking about momentum play, about lying to someone over and over again, just to get that little bit of advantage that lets you kill them, and then once they're dead, you don't have to worry about it. The problem is, that's not always effective. That's effective if they have a chance of believing your lies. But if you've already lied to them, or if you've done stuff like building Fleet Smyrna here, that's pretty much unexplainable in terms of working with Italy, it's not a good idea to just continue to lie at that point. they'll just stop believing you, you'll lose any form of credibility. It's not going to give you an advantage, it's just going to make them angrier. So you have a few other options. The first option, which was the one I used to go for a lot, and I still sometimes do, it's hard to grow out of it as a player, although it's something I need to grow out of, is just closing them off completely, not talking to them at all. The plus of this, it saves your credibility to some degree, because you're not lying to the person. But that's the only plus. They're still going to feel annoyed at you for not contacting them. Even though you're not lying to them, it's still not ideal. And you're not really making any headway in your relations with them. If things turn out badly, and you need to change up the strategy, suddenly contacting them out of the blue and saying, hey, I know I haven't talked to you for however long, but suddenly I need your help, is probably not going to work. The other option is to be honest. Just talk to them and say, hey, I know we're at war, basically now, I know I stabbed you, just want to keep comms open. I don't think it's good play to just completely shut someone off after a stab, and I hope you can understand that. This can be bad, it can be good. It will usually result in a lot more anger up front, but a lot less later down the line, as they sort of realise that you could have been a lot worse with your response. Probably the best way to do it is to phrase it in a way that makes it seem like you had very good reasons for doing so. Maybe not reasons they'd agree with, but at least reasons that you can present. So in this case, I told him I really wanted to get rid of that Russian fleet here, right? That's my reason for supporting Austria into Romania. And he bought that. That's kind of reasonable. The fleet build, there was no real explanation for in terms of working with him, so I just put it out there and said, I don't think I can make enough progress for it to be worth it to just attack Austria here. I'll be fighting Russia on my own, and Russia has a pretty strong defense. Once we manage to break Austria down, I will finally be able to advance on Russia, but I still won't really have much support unless you choose to give it to me, and you'll have the stronger position from here because I'll have been fighting Russia in a stalemate war the entire time. He obviously wasn't particularly happy with that reasoning, but it made some degree of sense. It was better than saying to him, I don't like you, which wasn't true, but I like you less than Austria would have sounded like that to him. It gave him a chance to argue, it gave him a chance to reason with me, which continued the conversation. At the end of the day, I stuck with the same viewpoint. I presented my own arguments and such. I think he feels a little bit better about it than he would if I hadn't talked to him at all, or if I'd lied to him further, or if I'd just told him the honest truth, the, complete honest truth, because obviously there's some lies in what I'm saying, but they're lies that make him feel a little bit better. So, long story short, I told him I wasn't going to work with him anymore. He was not particularly happy with this. He basically gave me an ultimatum saying, we need to be attacking Austria now, otherwise I'll back out and fight France instead. And I think he thought that would be effective, because obviously as Turkey you want to kill Austria, right? That's what everyone thinks. But I'm pretty happy in this alliance with Austria, so that was music to my ears. I was thinking, okay, that's perfect, I'll just get him to go attack France. I can roll with Austria for a bit, maybe leave Italy on his feet for a little bit while we deal with Russia, and then go in and stab him from behind, and hopefully he'll spend that time harassing France and stopping this England-France alliance from advancing too far across the board. Now, I had to think of a way to phrase that wasn't immediately going to say, yes, I want you to go there, because that wouldn't have made sense with the reasoning I'd given before. So I was like, I really don't think I can take on Russia without Austria's assistance. Is there any way we can sort of declare a three-way truce down here, just long enough for me to attack Russia and then you can come back or something and attack Austria? It's like, no. It's now or never. And I considered for a long time, I kept talking for a long time, and then I came to the conclusion that it has to not be now, and that we'll have to come back and see what we can do later against Austria. Which for me was the conclusion I'd arrived at right at the start, but I had to present it as something I was slowly coming to figure out, because it needed to sound like his argument was having an effect on me. At the end of the day, he entered these moves, which was insane. He went to Tuscany, he pulled out of Trieste, he held Naples, and he moved Ion to the Tyrrhenian Sea. I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the rest of the moves, although I will quickly say, with regards to what I discussed with Austria and what he was doing, we ended up going with the moveset you can see here, moving Romania into Sevastopol, because that is the only uncounterable move over here. There is one potential counter to it, which would be attacking Romania, but we figured that was pretty much out of the question. There's no way you support an attack into Romania, of all places, here. There's obviously some significant risk up here, but there wasn't much we could do about that. We sort of felt like we'd take as much as we could along here, and try and retake the Austrian homes in a little while if that ends up being a problem. As it happened, no it didn't, because Russia entered support for the Italian unit, which would have been perfect, except obviously the Italian unit did not go there. And his other moves up here were something like this. I will just go in and fill them in and then skip forward to that point. There's all the moves filled in. I'll hit to resolve here. And as you can see, here's where we're at with the retreat on Munich. I don't know where he's retreating yet. I really like these French moves. Moving up into the mid-Atlantic Ocean and onto Spain's south coast gives him the flexibility he needs to go either direction, either to Western Med and North Africa in a turn, which would be fantastic momentum south, or up to North Atlantic Ocean or Irish Sea more likely, plus Mid-Atlantic Ocean, which gives you your convoy route into the British Isles and the ability to just stab the hell out of England. France playing extremely well again, but that might be countered just by the fact that Italy is turning around down here. As for the future here, we have discussed, I'm just going to enter a retreat very quickly. This is what we think he'll do, retreat to Tyrolia, because he's tried to check that through with Austria. Just assuming that's the case, this is what Austria wants. Now that's mostly fine, except obviously there's a massive hole in Budapest here. This is just going to retreat there, and if we move this to block it, that might just go in, and then Austria doesn't get his home centre back, plus he's covered up a home centre for his build. So I think ultimately we're not going to go with this. The more likely solution is something like a self-bounce here, in which case we kind of have to just hold back because there's not a huge amount more we can do. We could attempt to get Ukraine, like so, but that's dangerous because it leaves Romania open. Ultimately, we'll just have to see how things go. I'm going to try and talk to Russia and see if he'll start sending units up north if we offer to prop him up further, but I doubt he'll accept that. Aside from that, probably the main concern is just taking out Italy as quickly as possible. That will be done by positioning fleets correctly in this area and hopefully getting France out of Tyrolia, because that's going to be a huge pain in our sides. We'll have to see how things go on that front. I'm just going to show you a little bit of example press from Italy here. Oh yes, that's the other thing. So, Italy is currently angry at me. I need to respond to this, and I will. He believes that the move into Romania was aggressive against Austria. I'm just going to explain to him the truth, that was arranged. He is angry because he backed out thinking I wasn't attacking Austria, and then I entered a move that he views as attacking Austria. And after the amount we negotiated around it, obviously that sucks a bit for him. So this was the message I sent to Italy to start off with, to sort of break that silence after I built the fleet. I'll be honest here, I spoke to Austria through builds, and I was getting a fair number of offers from him, particularly around him offering to help me in Russia now. One of the conditions for that was the fleet build, and I haven't really been sure what to say to you about it since it's pretty obviously targeted at me getting Greece, and I know that's a centre you want too. That's trying to downplay the fact that the fleet is obviously anti-Italy by saying it's anti-Greece, which is something Italy does not have yet, and did not have at the time, but it's something I want. And not Italy itself. I really don't want to lie to you here because I really like your press, and I still think we could work together, but it feels like I'm being forced to choose between working with you or making any progress on the Russian front, which is the front I want to advance quickly on, because I think Russia is likely to get demolished in the north. Which is true, Russia is under significant threat of just getting steamrolled in the north, and once that happens, the entire area might be sealed off to me. Little bits of truth. That's the important part. Little bits of truth in there. Enough truth to make it so that the lies are sort of behind the scenes. Sorry it's taken so long to get this message to you. I've been writing and deleting, and I think this is maybe a weak part of the message, but we'll skip through that. Well, I've done a lot of thinking through builds as well, and for me it's pretty something by this point. There are exactly two scenarios I'm willing to consider. This is his ultimatum. He's saying if you want to team up with Austria, I'll leave and go team up with Germany to deal with France. He's saying that as a source of threat, I think. But it's a threat I like. If I have your unconditional support, we can still crush Austria and move north together. That's actually true. We could have done, but I didn't want to do that because I like Austria. But I can't let you support him into more centres or anything like that anymore. That was the problem. That was the point I had to focus on, because obviously supporting him into more centres is something I would have to do if I was going to work with him. You're either on my side or his side, it's your choice. I've similarly enjoyed press with you, you seem genuine and knowledgeable, which is why I did not see you supporting Austria in Romania coming at all. I was certain you were my ally and Austria was our joined enemy. So this is my lies coming back to bite me. I'm hoping to just brush that off by seeming really unsure about everything, which is exactly what I open up the next message about. Arg. Arg is a fantastic word to use as a starting point for a message, because it makes it sound like you're deliberating. I'm really unsure on this whole thing, I like you more, blah 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 blah. If there's a way I can do both, I absolutely want to. I was worried about French fleets too, and I can't imagine they're going anywhere other than the Med, but at the same time I'm worried that if you back off completely from Austria, he might work with me for a short time to kill Russia, but when the time comes to turn on him, he's going to be way too strong for me to deal with. This is obviously all blagging, I don't really believe this. It might actually happen if Austria does turn on me, but I don't think he will. It's added in for the impact that's coming from it, for the sort of extra bit that tells the person I am actually considering their offer. I'm not, but I need to write the things that I would be writing if I was. If you think you can make progress against France, I could work with Austria temporarily, take Russia out of the equation, and then we could work together against him once that's done. With the condition that if Austria attacks you in the meantime, I'll immediately jump on him regardless of whether Russia has been driven off or not. That's a lie, but the fact that I've considered it in the message is telling him I'm thinking through this completely. I don't know if that's a great compromise or not. I know it's not what you're hoping for. I just don't feel anywhere near as confident as I did that a straight IT is actually going to get me anywhere. So, this is basically what I'm doing. I do the same thing down here. We basically talk like that back and forth for a little while. The important part is deliberation. Even though I wasn't considering any of it at all, the fact that I'm debating with him and raising points about what would be effective and what wouldn't is all there to create the illusion that I'm actually wanting to work with him. It might turn out to be completely useless, I might never need this negotiation, but it's useful to have a backup option always. And having people less annoyed at you is always a great way to do that. So, I'm going to leave it off here. Hopefully I'll talk to you again soon. Sorry to editing meme. I think I was having a bit of trouble with my voice here. But, yeah. See you in the next one. Okay, so we're back. This is the map of the orders that happened in the fall of 1902. As you can see, the game's advanced a little bit further than that, but I'm just going to be talking through what happened here, and the negotiation that happened. There wasn't so much negotiation on a sort of... Well, with my enemies, people like Italy and Russia sort of got the cold shoulder in this one. The real negotiation that happened here was with Austria, and specifically around what he was doing. If you listen to the last bit, which you will have done because this is the same video, you'll remember that his intention was to go to Galicia and have me support him in there, and there was that problem of Russia potentially retreating into Budapest. Now, I suggested maybe the solution to this would be for him to support himself into Tyrolia and just leave his centres open here, which initially he responded to like I was mad here. So, I don't know if I can really afford to lose a home centre, well, with this. I made a bunch of potential scenarios with my sandboxes just to convince him that this is a good plan in general. The worst case scenario is the one where Russia ends up in Budapest, which is exactly the same as what would happen with Austria's plan. So I think it was better from that perspective. He's a bit unsure about it. I'm not sure if I can afford to lose a home centre. That's what Italy and France are going to bet on. Yada yada yada. The important thing here is just momentum. That's what this is all about. So, in my mind, I think this AT needs to be rolling, this Austria-Turkey alliance, as fast as possible, because during that phase even, I got a message from Germany saying, you probably need to stab Austria soon, otherwise I'm going to be in real trouble. And that's worrying me, because if France and Germany team up here, they're both fairly good players from what I've heard of their press, and I think that would be more than enough to stop us and halt us. So we need to push fast, and we need to kill our immediate enemies and then get in there in the west before they can set up a defensive line. How do we do that? Well, we do that with momentum play. We do that by not caring about Vienna and Budapest. If Russia goes in there, yes, we'll deal with it, but let's go for the immediate potential huge advantage that we can get by hoping Russia goes to Romania. And what do you know? Russia went to Romania. So it all paid off really well over here. Austria gets into Tyrolia, suddenly Italy's really far on the back foot, Austria gets a double army build, which is huge, and if we move forward here to the winter, and I will show what happened here. It's a bit hard to see on the WebDip map, but basically we have a German fleet build, we have an English fleet build, we have two Austrian army builds, a Turkish fleet build. France got no builds, which is pretty fantastic, honestly, because it means nothing in Marseille, despite the fact he pivoted around to the south here. But the most important thing in the build phase for us was this disband right here. Galicia came off the board. We were both expecting Gulf of Bothnia to come off, but clearly Russia is more invested in keeping St. Petersburg than he is in holding us back for a little bit longer on the south side, which is perfect for us. It means we can commit this Vienna unit to the attack on Italy, and it means our Budapest unit can potentially just get in completely uncontested here. We will have to see on orders. Again, I have not been paying a huge amount of attention to press this round. As you can see, my press to Italy, because in the previous phase he was... Where is it? Here, yeah. I will take a move into Ionian as a sign you don't really want to work with me after all. I really needed to go to Ionian for our plan to work, so at that point I just have to break the alliance completely. And my message past that point was just saying, sorry, I think this was my fault from the start, I misread the situation, and yes, I could have worked with you, you were right. But right now, because of the mistakes I've made, this alliance has had the door shut on it. Don't blame yourself, this is my fault, blah 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 blah. Which, it's not the kind of thing I'd like to receive, but I think it's the kind of thing that will make him potentially a little bit more likely to work with me than if I just stop talking to him or such like. There's a bit more discussion here, but it's not really relevant. The main discussion here has been with Austria about moves again. There's not been much else, and that's my fault. I should really have been talking to more people than I am, but I'm very committed to this Austria-Turkey, and it's about our plan of attack. So the main parts of the plan of attack on Italy is this move right here, Tyrolia to Piedmont. That's a fantastic move, both because if Italy doesn't block it, we successfully get 3 units around Venice, which makes it very much takeable. We are also planning to do this, which gives us 4 units around Venice, in which case Piedmont can harass the French. But even if Piedmont can't harass the French, it can still pin down an army defending it. With an army in Piedmont, you need to defend Marseille. There's no real... Well, you can guess on it, but most people will defend Marseille, and by moving down to Marseille, there's a very good possibility that he covers his home centre and can't build a southern fleet. On the other front, this is the interesting one. So I've suggested some things, Austria has suggested others, and I think it signifies a difference in the way that Austria and I view this alliance. So Austria wants me to move Armenia back and Black Sea back. Maybe not immediately, but at some point. I would view that as being because Austria wants this area to be his and mine to be along the coast here. That's fine in a juggernaut, where you're taking Serbia, Trieste, Greece. That sort of keeps you on balance. But in an Austria-Turkey alliance, this is the main problem that leads to Austria-Turkey alliances collapsing. Because you can't take as much along this route as Austria can through here. I think Austria has a huge amount of expansion. Turkey just gets hemmed into the corner. Turkey gets frustrated and has to stab. My solution to this is simply to have this area here be Turkish. Just a few armies along this front balances out everything. It's not perfect. Austria's in a much more vulnerable position, but between good players you can balance that out. Whereas even between good players you can't balance out an alliance that forces Turkey to only take coastal centres. There's just no way Turkey can get enough of them for it to be worthwhile for them. So I'm going to have to talk to him more about that, but for now, he is fairly strongly committed to wanting to do this. Which is not... It's really not as much momentum as I was hoping for. I would prefer something like this. And if he shows up before the end of the phase, that's what I'm going to ask him to do, because this guarantees either Galicia is entered here, or Sevastopol gets into Ukraine, which is also big. I have not put this order in for a very specific reason. If Moscow attacks with support from Ukraine, like so, then this isn't necessary. Just that will work because Ukraine will be dislodged, so Ukraine's support will not count, and then Moscow will bounce out to Armenia. If he attacks the other way, this bounces with this, the 2 support moves, and this move is completely irrelevant down here. The only way this move here matters is if there's a support hold on Ukraine, in which case doing this will dislodge and disband Sevastopol because it's not my unit, and I don't want to do that. It would certainly clear the way for my units on this front, but it would also make Austria fairly unhappy. So, my hope is that he'll accept something like this. There's not a lot of time left in the phase to talk to him about it, so I'm hoping he shows up. Otherwise, there is a possibility I do this. keeping the Black Sea there but moving one army away just to convoy it over to Apulia or something like that, as per his wishes. But alongside that will be a long discussion with him about where I see this alliance going and how exactly I want to balance it out with regard to me taking centres along this front here. So anyway, that's pretty much it. There's not a lot on the diplomacy front there. I am aware I haven't talked very much about this side of the board, but I think it will make more sense to talk about that next phase. So, hopefully, I can just skip ahead to next phase here. Alright, so here I am back again, fall 1903, and I will swap over to the backstabber, just to make things clear of what exactly happened here. As you can see, I did in fact manage to convince Austria to go to Ukraine, although it didn't work out. I really wish it had worked out, because that would have been amazing, especially if Moscow had done something up north, but as is, it was a gamble and it didn't really pay off. But it didn't do any worse than our previous move, which was Romania support Budapest to Galicia would have done. It ended up being pretty much the same. The concession I made for that was moving Black Sea back to Constantinople. That was my own suggestion, mainly because I don't see a huge amount more Black Sea can do, apart from convoying Armenia over to Rum, and now that the Austrian has agreed to give me Sevastopol eventually being pretty soon, there's no real need for that. This army is getting out one way or another. It just might take a little while. The other thing... oh, I forgot to put in this. The other thing to mention here, obviously, the French front. France retreating Western Med to Mid-Atlantic and Mid-Atlantic to North Atlantic. Now, I feel really dumb for not spotting that this was a possibility, because obviously the convoy over to North Africa, is a real giveaway that this is potentially going to happen. Keeping that fleet in the Mid-Atlantic Ocean is just so effective against England, and here it was an absolutely brutal stab. If we move forward to see how these orders resolved, you can see this is the fall, so there's no builds yet. France has both these fleets here, an open Liverpool, free to take Liverpool. Obviously, this would be like the new player's approach, maybe just walk into Liverpool, but what France is going to do is convoy this army up here with both of these units. And then suddenly you've got an army in England, and England has no way to contest that unless they convoy an army back, which costs a huge amount, especially considering in order to convoy back you have to go via north, and that means Skagerrak is just stuck there. You can either retreat defensively like this, or you can defend your homeland. That's a really, really difficult situation. I think England is pretty much screwed, especially considering Germany and France are very clearly working together now. That's an issue. Because as long as England was strong, there was always the possibility that when we push across the line, England will continue attacking whoever they're attacking, mess up the defense, and give us an opportunity to get through. With a strong France, a strong Germany, and England basically dead, that becomes a lot less of a possibility. We basically have to push across before France and Germany are done with England, otherwise we're in huge trouble. We're just stopped at the stalemate line. So, where do we go from here? Well, this is why momentum is so important. You notice this is fall 1903. Italy is next to dead, not quite dead, but probably dead by 1904. Russia is almost dead, again by the end of 1904. We've completely blitzed this. We've done it about as fast as you can possibly do, and I'm still talking about how we might not get there in time. In some cases, this could have resulted from the fact that we were moving so fast. In this case, I don't think it did. That stab from France was just so effective, he probably would have done it anyway. So the fact that we're moving so fast is probably the only reason why we still have a chance of getting across that line. Acting as just one combined big nation is so strong. And that's exactly what we're aiming to continue to do. So, where do we go from here? Well, there's two priorities. First, kill Russia, specifically in Warsaw and Moscow. Get that out of the way as quickly as possible. The easiest way to do that is like so, again. This way, Russia can only defend one of Moscow or Warsaw. There is the possibility of doing this instead. But this fails against what I would reckon is a pretty good Russian moveset, a pretty likely one to happen, which is moving this up to Warsaw to block, and then moving Moscow down to Sevastopol, just to predicting these exact orders. Another option is just going to guarantee Ukraine, but I would prefer to take the chance at Warsaw, just because it gives us that extra bit of momentum if we get there. And you're going to be fed up of me saying momentum by the end of this video, but it's really important. I'll probably title the video something to do with it, because, man, diplomacy is a game about momentum. If you get rolling, you can often just continue to roll. Just because for every supply center you're getting more units that can get you more supply centers. It's such a snowbally game. So, the moveset I want to go with, which is this one, it obviously potentially loses Austria's Sevastopol, which is an issue. It's definitely an issue. But Austria has agreed to give me Sevastopol eventually anyway, so I think that's reasonable. The moveset down here is the more interesting one. So, obviously Austria needs to take Venice right now. There's no point contesting Marseille, there's probably no point contesting Munich, because both are going to be defended, and by not contesting them, we do make them get covered up, so there's no builds there, which is great for us. So Austria guarantees Venice here. We're just going to try and grind out Italy as fast as we can. The moves down here are interesting ones, because Austria wants to give me an extra center, which is good. I'm a fan of this. I need a build because he's ahead of me. I think me getting a build makes my power level grow more than he does, because he's about to be occupied by this attack on the German front, whereas I always have the potential to stab him, really. Which is why I'm mainly building fleets, so I don't have as much of that potential. But the only way we're going to really guarantee me the build is to do this, go into Greece. And that means I'm not able to backfill Ionian. Not being able to backfill Ionian is a really big problem, because we need to get units in Naples and Ionian as soon as possible. And really, there is no chance we can take Naples if he just does this. But there are some other options. Obviously, the main one is just trying to make him do anything else with this fleet. And one of the other things he could do with this fleet is tap Ion and tap Apulia with his army. That's a potential moveset, because if he supports hold here, he might be betting on us going for one of Munich or Marseille and using Apulia to support this in which case this would cut it, he'd save himself a center here. That would all go very well. The only way to effectively counter this, on web diplomacy anyway, I'll get to why that's interesting, is to support Ionian in here. Because if you do it the other way around, then Ionian gets cut, Apulia doesn't move anywhere, we don't get our center. And the Italian fleet getting into Ionian is irritating. It's not completely undefeatable, but it's definitely irritating to get out of there and then cover up all the centers that we would need to cover. The other thing is, if I do this, this fleet in Constantinople has the chance of just getting stuck here, which is awful. So Greece seems like the better option there anyway. This leads to another problem, which is that if we're doing this move set up here, I have a chance of taking both Sevastopol and Greece, while Austria just takes Venice. Which means Austria goes down a build. And that's really bad. He would have to disband this unit on the Ionian, well, in the Ionian, assuming he doesn't get into Naples. And Just the fact that he's having to disband at all is a massive pain, because he's about to be at war with someone he needs all his units against. And I really want him to be able to push a little bit in that war, because I want Germany and France on the back foot here. He needs to at least be able to hold his own. So, the other possibility down here that I haven't mentioned is something called Convoy kidnapping. The reason I didn't mention it initially is that it's actually outright just illegal on most sites. To explain this a little bit more, the diplomacy rulebook is not exactly precise on what happens in every scenario. You'll be familiar probably with people asking what happens here or what happens there. It's a confusing game in general, but there are some very specific moves that the rulebook doesn't even cover. This meant that way back when people played on the boards, and just on the boards or by mail, the GM would have to make a decision on what moves they'd allow and what moves they'd disallow, and you had just different ways of resolving orders all over the place. More recently, a man, and I apologise if I pronounce this completely incorrectly, but I believe he's called Lukas Krushvik, created the Diplomacy Adjudicator test cases, which were a way of making sure every online diplomacy site, or every diplomacy adjudicator in general, anything that automatically resolved orders, would resolve orders in a way that followed the rulebook. Now, it has some points in it where it says, you can either do this or do this, and then it will recommend one of the two. It usually does that when the rulebook isn't clear. One of the scenarios where the rulebook isn't clear is the case of convoy kidnapping. That is when you do this. So, let's say I wanted to move Apulia into Naples, and keep the Ionian Sea where it is. Obviously there's a huge advantage to that here. The Ionian and Naples together would be able to push out into the Tyrrhenian on the next turn, and we wouldn't have this Italian fleet behind us. So, how do you do that? Two units can't swap places, right? They can swap places if one of them is carried via convoy. Let's say we issued this fleet in Ionian an order to convoy Naples to Apulia. Suddenly we've got a convoy kidnap situation, which is where Italy did not intend Naples to actually move to Apulia. It just intended to tap. But the fact that it's now going via convoy via the Austrian unit means that it goes round here into Apulia, and the fleet in Apulia swaps places with it and gets into Naples. On most sites this is completely forbidden. On web diplomacy, whenever you move to an adjacent province and you have the option to go via convoy, you have to explicitly say, I'm going via convoy to get there. But on Backstabber, let's just resolve these orders a second. As you can see, a Naples to Apulia succeeds. I'm just going to quickly enter retreats here. And you can see they've completely swapped places. Backstabber is one of the few sites that doesn't take the recommendation. I've spoken to the Backstabber developers about this before, and they said it's because they felt that it was more interesting with that in the rulebook. And I actually really like that. I really like this possibility, as long as people know it's a possibility. On Backstabber they do. It's not something that comes up very often, but it's absolutely hilarious when you can pull it off, and this is exactly the situation where it would be incredible. So, I'm going to roll back now. That was a bit of a tangent, but it was a tangent about something I really wanted to talk about. So, obviously that's not possible on web diplomacy. I'm very sad, but hey, what can you do? So we're going to have to go with this plan instead. Now, you may be asking me, why am I not considering stabbing Austria here? We've got a possible France-Germany alliance that's going to be very difficult to push through. Maybe we're going to end this board as Turkey-Austria versus France-Germany, and it's going to be a four-way draw, no one's going to get very many points, yada 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 yada. My philosophy as a player is to push for the solo whenever I can, even if it's a game like the tournament game where you don't necessarily need a solo to do well, especially in summer squares. If I stabbed Austria here, I'd be costing myself the solo, no matter what. if I go, say, Budapest, if I go into Sevastopol as well, into Greece, if I helped Italy keep this, I'm causing disruption on my side of the board, while the other side of the board is getting their act together and starting to work together. In order for me to have any chance at progressing, I would need to cause so much disruption to this side that they would not resolve by the time I'm done taking everything on this front. And that's a long time ahead. There's still a lot of units here, and I'm mostly a fleet power. I can't take a lot of centres right now. Even if I could, I think that would be too much of an ask. This is the thing about alliance play. You push across the line, you try and keep it relatively balanced so neither of you can stab the other, but you give yourself a slight advantage towards the end that allows you to push into your ally right at the very end of the game and take that win, if you can. But anyway, yes. So, how are we going to get further? Well, first things first, we need to side with England up here. We need to try and get England to keep as much as possible for as long as possible. The main way we're going to do that is by giving him advice to just go here, and then helping him take Moscow, potentially keeping him propped up and keeping those fleets on the board. That's our biggest priority here. Make sure those fleets stay on the board, and France and Germany cannot pivot with their fleets down to the Western Med. Obviously for Austria, the priorities are a little bit different. He's trying to make sure that he can push through on this front. But for me, my most important priority is getting to the Mid-Atlantic Ocean before these fleets turn around. What else can we do? We can attempt to turn Germany and France against each other. We will try and put in some effort to doing that, but I don't think it's going to work. The other thing I've potentially considered is offering Italy a deal whereby he doesn't oppose us too much here, and we keep him alive provided he leads the charge against France. That's a long shot. That's a really long shot, because right now we were the two people who stabbed him. I probably stabbed him the most. He has more loyalty to France, but if he considered survival more important than his previous loyalties, this could be a really effective way of speeding us up. Not only by allowing us to take Italy faster, it also gives us that edge of having a fleet in the Western Mediterranean immediately. Not just after we get there, but before anything happens, there'll be some disruption on this French front. Will we actually leave him alive? That's debatable. I think at the end of the day, the sum of squares scoring, it probably allows us to leave him alive and not suffer too many point losses for it, but that depends on conversations with Austria and such like, but at least telling him that should have a chance of getting him to turn around, and that's what's important. Alright, I'm going to cut it off here. I haven't talked much about negotiation, but that's because I haven't done much negotiation this phase yet. We'll see how this turns out. Okay, orders have not gone through yet. As you can see, 6 hours to the deadline here, but things have changed up a little bit, so I'm just going to go through how they have. First things first, the minor thing is that I've agreed to do this. Honestly, on reflection, it is the better move. The other move wasn't amazing. The main reason for that just being the fact that Armenia could have been bounced here, and then even if Sevastopol makes it into Ukraine, you don't have a great angle of attack on Moscow. But the main reason is just, it's guaranteed. There's no real point going for Warsaw here, when he's probably going to defend it. And, like, in this case, we always make a gain. It's not all about supply centers all the time, and I was overlooking that. So, something we have done, we've offered England that if he gets into St. Petersburg here, he is going to get support into Moscow. We're not sure whether we're actually going to give that support, or rather, we might give that support and then knock him out of Moscow again immediately, because we might be overvaluing these fleets here. And once England has a stranglehold on St. Petersburg, if France just doubles back, we might be in trouble just because we can't push through that, especially if they form some kind of Western triple. So, for now, we're being good allies, we're staying on his side and, you know, giving him options, and hopefully giving him options that benefit us and get rid of Russia more quickly, but we might not be keeping to that. We'll see as we go along. The other big thing, like big thing, is we figured out a plan of action for Italy down here, and that is, I talked to Italy. I should show you the press here, because it is quite long, and it was talked about with Austria first. Where is it here? Right, so first off, I just opened up the conversation again. It's nice to get things off the ground when, obviously, it's been a little while since I last messaged him, Autumn 1902, which was my fault. I should have kept it up, but when you haven't messaged for a while, you don't just want to jump straight into a proposal, because they won't take that very well. So I sort of got the discussion going a little bit with was the French backing off arranged, yada yada yada. That seems like a really weird turnabout. Also just highlighting the fact that France has abandoned him in his moment of need. And yeah, he replies it's not arranged, and I told him I would throw my centres to him, but apparently he thought different of it. Maybe he thinks he's not strong enough to push you guys back or something, I don't know. So, the idea here, I have an offer if you're interested. I came up with this while I was walking back today, and I think it's actually a pretty good idea. So yeah, I talked earlier about potentially getting Italy to do this, and that's not likely, is the general sentiment, mainly because obviously Italy has to just trust that we're going to leave him centres here. He's completely abandoning his defence, just not going to get much out of it at all, and he's going to look like an idiot if it goes wrong. So, I didn't go in that strong. I did talk about it. I was thinking the quickest way to strike France would be to team up with you and use your fleet to punch through the potential blockade before it gets set up. The important thing is, I sort of gave my entire reasoning for this, and I gave him an out to just be honest with me if he didn't want to do it. The out was here, although no problem if not. I'd understand that after everything this game, and then another reiteration of that at the end. Again, no worries if the answer is no. You don't have much reason to want me to do well here after everything that's happened, and then just reiterate my points, but provided I can talk Austria into it too, which I think I can, it won't be a 0-point game for you this way. Now, that's quite important, because it just makes the message as a whole look a little bit more friendly, a little bit more believable as well, that I'm giving him an out. To just be honest with me if he doesn't want to do it. That also makes me look more honest with my proposal, which I am kind of being honest here. I'm not sure if I'll let him live to the end of the game, but if he does do this, I'm certainly going to let him live longer than he would otherwise live, because his fleet will be essentially mine, and I don't want to have to rebuild a fleet that's all the way up here, back here, if it's acting like it's mine. The important thing is, here, he seemed a bit dubious about Austria, and whether Austria would let him live. So I told him, I think I can talk him round to it, but even if I can't, ultimately he only needs to agree to it for a few phases, and then we can get you into a centre like Tunis, Portugal, or Spain, because he's still only got one fleet, and if he builds any more, I can sort of hem him in and stop him from getting out. The way it's set up now, it would be free to get Tunis, but Austria would need to support me. Now this set off bells in my head. Obviously he wants to do this, which I'm not sure about, because doing that means we don't make an attempt at Naples, and we potentially give him Tunis, which would keep him on 3 centres. If he does want to just delay us, that would be quite a nice way of delaying us on his part, and of staying alive in Tunis, and potentially getting the French support down here to help him in Tunis. I wanted to make sure that if he was taking Tunis, he was sacrificing something to us to do it. And the way I figured this would work is if we offered to support this move instead. I should be clear, I was very clear about the intention here. I was very clear about the fact that I would want to take Naples behind the convoy, as you can read in the message. Would you be willing to give up Naples here by convoying Nap to Tunis with Austrian support? My thinking is, you'll have Rome plus Tunis left, and you can keep Fleet Turanian and Army Tunis on the board, and then you're guaranteed survival with Army Tunis no matter what. We can leave you Rome, so your fleet can still fight France and take centres in Iberia, but even if Austria stabs and takes Rome off of you, you're still safe, and I'll hem any new fleets in to make sure he's never able to force you out of Tunis. And then I was talking about how I'd take Naples behind him and stuff. I also said I hadn't run this plan past Austria yet to make it look like I'm sort of saying this off the top of my head. And like this is coming from just me and hasn't been planned as some deception. But I had discussed this with Austria already. Also saying I wanted to get your thoughts on this first makes him feel a little bit more valued, I think, although that's debatable. So the idea here is if we were doing this, he has significant incentive just to hold Naples and just go along with this, because he's always going to get that Tunis unit even if he doesn't cooperate with the other terms of the agreement, even if he makes sure that he holds us back just that little bit. And in this case it would really hurt me in particular. But if he agrees to do this, he does not gain Tunis unless he gives up Naples. That's important. That's really important. It gives him very little reason to lie about it. Because, well, it gives him... He cannot do it without agreeing to our terms. He can't get that centre. So it's sort of an even trade-off in this case instead. And if it works, it puts us in a fantastic position. Now, after this, Austria came to me. I will just... there has been a huge amount of discussion with Austria. Like, plans like this don't just materialise. You have to realise this. Just because I haven't been talking much about my conversations with Austria doesn't mean they haven't been long. It's just that most of what I'm talking to him about is this tactics that I'm talking to you about as well. So it doesn't really help to reiterate over his messages. I'm down for it if he agrees to vacate Venice for me. i.e. Ven to Tus and Tus to Rome. Which is a weird order set when he could just go Venice to Rome, but whatever. Now that I was dubious on, because that Italy has significant incentive just to hold this. Like, if you tell Italy, I want you to back out of Venice, it's pretty much telling him, I'm going to go for Munich, or I'm going to go for Marseille. Probably not both, maybe both, you don't know. But once you tell him that, suddenly Italy has reason to lie to you, because if Italy lies and says, yeah, sure, I'll back out of Venice, and then holds it, suddenly he keeps Venice, whereas before, he was going to lose it guaranteed, but because of what he said to you, he's guaranteed that you've changed your orders to something that will let him keep the centre. And I think if you push that, he's more likely to lie about the thing he has no reason to lie about as well. Because if he's stabbing here, there's no reason for him not to stab here. He might as well just dedicate the resources to holding you back as much as possible. So I was against that. I didn't want to be too much against it because it sounds as feasible as my plan. But I think there were bigger downsides than my plan. At the end of the day, I ended up being too much of a pushover with Austria, and he just suggested it to Italy anyway. And it might have worked, because I've talked to Italy since, here, and he said, I can't defend Venice, it's 3 versus 2, I might as well give it to him, probably lessens the chances he actually takes Rome. He's maybe being genuine there. I tried to make sure he was being genuine by saying, oh yeah, you're good with Austria, you know, Austria likes you, so big up the fact that he's going to survive this if he sides with us. But I think it would have been more likely to work if Austria had just taken the guaranteed shot at Venice and not added that as an extra condition, and then we just demanded this specific part. But you know, maybe it works. Maybe it works out really well and we somehow get Venice and maybe even Munich and Marseille, although that would be really bad for me, because I really do not want Austria getting that many builds. But I don't think he's going to get both of these. I think at most he's even attacking one of them, and he's probably not going to get either. Also, there is a possibility that Austria just does this anyway. We were talking about this, and, you know, the chances that neither of these are covered, or whichever one we go for isn't covered, are quite low. Assuming these two are in an alliance, there's really no reason for them not to do that. There is a potential reason if they are going to contest Belgium, but I don't think they do. I think they've talked this out, and they would defend the important centres. The more likely one to not be defended is Munich, just if Germany is doing this. Because England is obviously here and Germany and England are at war, but I still think you protect Munich in this situation. Or at least it's not worth risking not getting Venice in order to take the pot shot at Munich that might not work anyway. I would probably say something different if I was in the Austrians' position, but this is from the Turkish viewpoint in this alliance. I should change this back to what it actually is also. So the last thing, I have had a very short discussion with France here. Just to try... We have this running joke that the first centres we're going to have that border each other will be Edinburgh and Liverpool, which obviously is not going to be the case, but... We're just joking about it a fair bit. But also, I've started talking about here, in very vague terms, stabbing Austria. I don't want to outright commit to anything, because I don't want to be seen as a liar. But it makes sense to sort of hint that I'm going to make a run for SOS points, in this case, the sum of squares score. And by sum of squares score, the easiest way to increase your sum of squares score is just to stab your ally on this side of the stalemate line if you don't really care about going for the solo. So that's what I've tried to indicate that I'm doing, just to put him at ease a little bit more and hopefully delay him from turning around in time. Because there is a possibility he just does this right now, which could put a spanner in the works. Especially since if this goes through, he's probably going to disband and then rebuild at home in one of these. If it doesn't go through, if Italy doesn't do what we're hoping he does, then he's just got this unit in Tunis, he gains Tunis, and he gets to build anyway. So hopefully Marseille is covered, but we'll see about that. So I'm trying to put him at ease, and hopefully putting him at ease means he's more likely to just stick to the plan, as Keith Nail would say, and continue attacking in the north, hopefully for too long, and we can just sweep him. I've made it very specifically clear that I intend to stab. I was more vague about it initially, but once he started pushing a little bit, I had to discuss why I haven't stabbed already. Which is, he's willing to let me have Sevastopol, and if I have armies in Sev and Rum without having stabbed him, that sets me up ridiculously well for a surprise attack on his home centres, right? Because you can go Sev to Rum, Rum to Sir, or Rum to Bud, and then support the Rum unit into whichever one of these two is free, plus taking Greece. Also, in the meantime, I am not taking Greece right now, because I think it's more important for Austria to have those units, especially if I'm getting Naples. Even if I don't get Naples, I think the position I'm ending up in is good enough that we're balanced. Especially since he's going to have to send those units up to the German front. Hopefully it's put France at ease a bit. We'll see how it turns out. I think for sure the next time I talk, it will be next phase. So, look forward to that. So, as you can see here, we're back. It's spring 1904. The main feeling I'm feeling right now is frustration and irritation. Which is surprising because if you look at the moves here, they actually look quite good for us. The main thing that looks good is what happened in Italy. So, let's just talk about that for a second. Italy convoyed out Naples into Tunis, which both destroyed the French army that was there and vacated Naples for this Turkish fleet to move in. The hope was that he would then put his fleet to good use for us, because that's sort of the exchange we're going for here. He'd be acting as a proxy state, and proxy states can be very, very useful in diplomacy. The key one here is probably England. If England is working with us, we can break through a potential stalemate line over here. But Italy can be really useful too, because that fleet is one phase ahead of any of ours. And that's huge, especially considering it can move twice in the phase by bouncing someone and being dislodged and retreating into another province. On the whole, it looked like a great setup. The main thing we just had to hope for was that Italy would continue working with us, and that looked pretty promising, because he also vacated Venice up here, as you can see, and that was very important, because the Austrian accidentally entered one of his supports the wrong way. It could have been even more useful if the Austrian had moved into Marseille here, as France left it completely undefended, but we couldn't have predicted that. I think if we were going for one of them, we would have gone for Munich, because that looked more likely. The fact that France took back Belgium was not something we were expecting. We were thinking that Germany would be given Belgium because of the ease of French taking of all the supply centres up here. Clearly they're not on a level playing field in their alliance, as far as I'm concerned, but we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, the other bad thing here was the English moves. As you can see, went pretty terribly on the whole. I sort of blame myself for that, because I didn't talk anywhere near enough to England or recommend any strategies. Austria did talk to England, and I was under the impression Austria had told England that we would support him into Moscow if he took St. Petersburg, which Austria probably did say, but I think England must have misunderstood, because he took St. Petersburg with the fleet. You can't even take Moscow from St. Petersburg if you take it with a fleet. All that fleet is now useful for is sitting in St. Petersburg, maintaining itself. You could disband it, and then use that dot to maintain a different unit for a year, because you will immediately lose St. Petersburg. Oh, it's just frustrating. Because if his army was here, he could have been supported down into Moscow, and then we've got England having a centre here that he doesn't need to defend for a while until they can get an army in here, which probably would take a while. So he could take his army off the board and use that to maintain a northern fleet. Northern fleets are so important in breaking the stalemate line, and all of England's are going to be wiped out real soon. And England is really our only hope of breaking through here, because Germany wants a four-way draw, and France is well in position to just completely block up the Mediterranean, unless he decides to stab Germany, which would be pretty dumb of him, I think, before me and Austria had stabbed each other. So, anyway, moving on to builds, this is where it goes even more downhill, because, as you can see, Italy took his fleet off the board, which was the main reason we wanted to work with him. It's still good that there's no French unit in Tunis, but this is essentially going to function as a French unit because it can't support us anywhere, and it's most likely just going to hold, in which case France is going to pull his units down here and just issue support hold orders for that Italian unit. Essentially, the Italian is going to switch sides. He's probably not going to say to us that he's switching sides, but essentially by just having this army here and no fleet that can help us, he has switched sides. We don't have a great way to take him out, because we ideally wanted to use these Austrian armies to push up the front line, in which case we've only got Naples and Venice, and in order to knock him out of Rome we have to use both of those, which means he can retreat to Apulia, and then we got a pain keeping him hemmed in. We could stab him on a fall turn, but again, it means not paying attention to what's going on over here with Naples for a turn, which is pretty bad. considering France is going to have fleets here and here next turn. So, we'll see how that goes. Obviously, Russian disband here is good for us, but it's also bad for us in that the main intention behind this, I think, is that Moscow can get up to St. Petersburg and then help the German into Norway. England's just going to get demolished here. There's no way we can help him because he put this fleet here instead of the army. I kind of get the logic, assuming he didn't want Norway to get left open in case, like, Sweden walked in, but just having that army there and being able to stay alive in Moscow would have been so much better. Because right now he's just counting on himself, he's got no help up there at all. So, where do we go from here? That is the question. Well, we could push up this front line. We can't really make progress on it. If we get Fleet Piedmont, Fleet Tuscany, Fleet Tyrrhenian Sea, Fleet Ionian, that's like the best position we can have against his fleets. That puts 3 on Lyon, 1 on Western Med even, and 2 on Tunis. So the only places we're threatening are Lyon and Tunis. He just needs to pull 1 fleet down, 2 fleets down, right? He's already got this unit here in Tunis, so he can defend that with, say, a unit in North Africa, and then he just needs Lyon West and 1 more. So, okay, he needs to bring 2 more units in than just the 3 he's got here, but he's going to get them quickly enough, and there's no way we're going to maneuver into position Piedmont, Tuscany, Tyrrhenian Sea, and Ionian Sea quickly enough for that for us to beat him to that. And even if we do, taking Lyon doesn't actually help us, because he just goes back into Spain, and then he's got defense on Western Mediterranean here. As long as he's got defense on Marseille, he can still hold the unit in Tunis, and he's still fine. The only way I can see to advance here is somehow tricking the Italian out of Tunis, or in some way offering to convoy him somewhere safer, say Greece, where he's off the front line, and then using his move to attack him, basically, to cut the French support to him, and then, you know, just support ourselves in because his move invalidates it. That's unlikely to work. It might work, holding out a little bit of hope, but very, very unlikely to. I think the only way I can successfully pull that bluff off is if I'm saying something like, I'm retreating from this front, so France is going to wipe you out no matter what here. Unless I fulfill my offer of keeping you safe and then take you away from here, you know, into this Austrian Greece place. Which kind of makes sense as well, because I don't have armies over here, so if I am stabbing Austria, it makes sense to bring in an Italian army to assist. But it's still a long shot. We can take Warsaw and Moscow very easily here. We probably can't take St. Petersburg in time. This is going to be blocked off for us, which means our main front of attack is here. But even there, Baltic support hold Berlin, brings down Denmark to Kiel, that can support hold Munich, that can support hold Munich, he's got a solid line again. And that line just needs to hold long enough. Again, he can just move Holland to Ruhr or something, and then, like, he's got a solid line no matter what. The only hope we've got is England doing something, and I don't think England is going to do anything useful here. So, where do we go from here is the question. Do we just let this game end in a 4-way draw? It's kind of nasty to have a 4-way draw decided after 1903. But if the alliances don't shift up, that's what's going to happen. There's no way to avoid that. So obviously the best way would be to have France stab Germany or Germany stab France. If that alliance collapses, we probably break through the stalemate line pretty easily and we can just roll over them. And as long as I outpace Austria to some degree, which might be a big ask, but it's not as big considering he's willing to give me centres to make up for ones he's taking on the front line, I can still win the game from there, or at least get a very good result. I would definitely be able to stop the Austrian from soloing, I think. Problem, they're not going to stab each other. It doesn't make any sense to. Germany is perfectly happy to just take the four-way draw, which is disappointing. But it makes sense from his perspective. He would be attacked from Austria here and France here if he attacked France, and if he goes against Austria, he's not making any gains, he's just holding his own. France could make a solo run in the north, but as long as he's got fleets tied down here, he can't. The only way I can see this happening is if France thinks I'm backing off from the Mediterranean. Then he doesn't have much to worry about here, and he can just push into German territory instead. Especially if he thinks he's going to have Tunis as well, because that really increases his solo chances. The problem, it really increases his solo chances, and I don't want that. I would pretty much have to stab Austria for real to do this. I don't think Austria would be comfortable with a solution that involved me fake stabbing him, just because it could lead up to a very real stab. I'll still have to run it by him, but, you know, I just don't think it's going to work. I'm still, as I said, I'm still going to try it. We'll see where it goes. I'll get back to you on that press. The important thing to consider, though, is he could just decide, I'm going to stay in this alliance with Germany, I like my German ally, and keep pushing into the Med, in which case my stab on Austria would be for nothing. And I'd be forced back onto the defensive here, and probably forced back on the Austrian mainland just because I don't have enough armies. So, the other question is, this is a sum of squares game, obviously, and if we can hold this four-way position for a little while, there is the potential that I could stab Austria effectively in like the last few years of the game, which would make me gain some of squares score before I can lose it to France again. I think that's also very difficult to pull off because it's public draw votes down here, as you can see if I hit the vote to draw and then cancel that vote. Well, you can see it's public, right? Everyone can see that. I hope that didn't post anything in global. No, it didn't. Okay, good. I'm used to V diplomacy where it would. So the problem with holding out for that sort of stab is I would have to be the one holding my draw vote back, in which case Austria gets suspicious and maybe pulls some units back just to deal with that. I'll keep my eyes open for an opportunity. If this wasn't a tournament game, I might just settle for the four-way or try and much harder to make France stab, even if that results in the same four-way, just because I like Austria a lot. But this is a tournament game, and I'm aiming for the finals. I need to do everything I can to get there. And giving up points because you like a player, while it's fine, it's just not my style. And it's not going to help you get to the end. So, right now I guess, we'll just push into Moscow and Warsaw and up to this line and see what we can do in terms of tricking the Italian into maybe giving up Tunis or such like. And I'll just see where this goes. It's still really disappointing to me that despite how fast we pushed as this Austria-Turkey alliance, we're still not going to get across that stalemate line. Mainly because England just fell apart so quickly. But maybe we will. We'll see where it goes. Hold out hope. And hopefully when I talk to you next, something good will have happened, but I doubt it. Okay, so I'm back again. It's still the same phase, as you can see, Spring 1904 diplomacy. There's not really much to update you on in terms of what's happening strategy-wise. Austria really wants to go for Russia on this front and secure these centres. What I'm more worried about, and this is really the first time I've been properly worried, is that this will be the phase that Austria stabs. His press this turn, I'm not sure what exactly it is about it, it just feels really off. This feels like natural Austria press, right? At the start of the phase, 1 AM, before I could really respond. oh my god, he actually disbanded Warsaw, also Italy just disbanded Tyrrhenium, blah blah blah, hit me up whenever I'll be around most of the day. Then I sent him some strategy messages at like 2 PM, which might have been while he was at work, and then at 7 he sort of gets back to me with this, let's just go with the war attack first and push Germany, this is what I'm thinking right now, moves, 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 moves. I was under the impression that Gal to war with Eucharist support was unbeatable. He's sort of saying, yeah, I don't want to go for Germany yet. And then 2 hours later, just let me know what you want to do, man. Which was my fault not getting back to that in time, but it just feels like there's a lot missing here. Maybe it's just my paranoia, because this is the sort of time in the game, sorry I don't have the backstabber board up, this is the time in the game where it's becoming increasingly obvious that this is a four-way draw if no one stabs, and so maybe he's feeling that I might be stabbing, or he's thinking he needs to stab, but overall, this is just putting me on edge, the fact that it was just this. There's no explanation of the moves, no like going into detail on why he wanted to go to war. It was all very straight to the point and very like, I have to write this message, I'm going to send this now, I'm not really going to bother doing much else. Usually not messaging very much is a sign of a stab, but a lot of the time it goes a little bit deeper than that, and it's about the content of the messages. This just seems like so much less than, look, this is like previous messages when we were discussing potentially backing off so that Germany would decide to attack France. We've got just generally his tactics discussions aren't just moves. He gives reasons for what he's doing, and right now he's not. So what do I intend to do about it? There's not a lot I can do about it right now, really. Oh yeah, I appear to have left the window open. But, there's not much I can do about it right now, really. Aside from just stab him first, and I don't want to do that. That's, like, I don't think I'm confident enough in my read to stab him first. And I don't think now is the right time to stab anyway. If he is attacking me, how far can he really get is my question. I can hold Bulgaria for the first year, because he can really only take Romania from me, and potentially Naples if he gets Italian support in here. But Naples is only maintaining this fleet here, and I've got an excess of fleets down here, so I should be fine. I can hold Bulgaria for a year. I can then just hold my initial 3 very, very easily, because he doesn't have fleets. I just really hope my read is wrong in the first place, because if he stabs me, I'm down to basically 3 centers. I don't get the opportunity to stab him for that point boost, and we don't get the opportunity to break through this line if France or Germany is decide to stab each other. Plus, France has a very good solo shot if we go to war with each other immediately, because he's got an open Tunis, and with that Tunis, he can just take Munich, Berlin, St. Petersburg, and everything behind there, and he's got his solo. Which sounds like a lot, but it's not actually that much, especially with the fleet domination he's got here if he doesn't have to commit them all down south. We'll see how this goes. Fingers crossed I'm talking a bunch of nonsense, and you'll see as the phase rolls over. I just wanted to talk there because this is really the first time I've had this uneasy feeling with Austria, and it's kind of unusual for a game, because usually I'm paranoid all the way through, but here I've been, like, rock solid with him so far. Not anymore. We'll see how it turns out. Righto, as you can see, autumn 1904 diplomacy phase. The orders have gone through. I'll switch back to Backstabber for clarity reasons here. On the whole,
good season for us, I think. Very good season, mainly because of two moves here. The first, France getting greedy with the solo. I say two moves, three moves really. France getting greedy with the solo and sending Brest north, which makes sense if he's expecting one of us to stab, because he doesn't need the extra fleet down here if we're not pushing as hard as we possibly can. And that's a reasonable assumption given it's an Austria-Turkey, and given some of the information I'm feeding him. I am constantly telling him I'm setting up to stab, and that's precisely for this reason, to try and get him to do things like this, go all-out aggressive. People in the Discord have been sort of praising France's aggressiveness for the same reason. I think ultimately it will be a mistake, but we'll see how that comes out. In the end, he's going to get a build from it, which would have been contested otherwise with Skagerrak and Edinburgh. He would have had to wait for Germany to pressure this area. That build I think we can deal with for a couple of reasons, and I'll get to them in a little bit. The other majorly important thing that happened is Germany's moves up here. First of all, the convoy to Livonia, and secondly, Holland Hold. Holland Hold shows that he really doesn't trust the Frenchmen. And obviously, that's great for us. It means that he's much less likely to set up a stalemate line in time on this front, and that's the same with Berlin to Livonia. Also means he might potentially stab France, but most likely he doesn't. He just keeps units around to deflect potential French attack, which still fine by us. It still means we'll advance faster. Now, the downside to this is with Berlin to Livonia, I think that's a really bad move, because you could have gotten Russia into St. Petersburg either way, like with Moscow up to St. Petersburg supported by Gulf of Bothnia. Putting the extra army there doesn't do very much unless you're looking to help Russia contest one of Warsaw or Moscow, which doesn't really help him long term. It's like a one-phase thing. He'll lose one instead of the other, but then England keeps St. Petersburg, and that's still quite good for us, right? Especially since it means he's got to wait another year to have enough units on Norway, unless he's moving Sweden to Skagerrak, Baltic to Sweden, which is very possible as well. But the important thing here, why saving the Russian unit here isn't a big deal against us, is that he's left his flank open with this move. He didn't even move Holland in to reinforce. If we can get 4 units along this border, he's going to be completely screwed. Now, it's possible he's trying to take St. Petersburg for himself and get that build and stick it back here, in which case it's worth it. But in order to do that, he needs to have Russia basically sacrifice himself for Germany's benefit. Which, maybe he can talk him into that. Maybe he's a good enough player to do that. We'll see what happens, but it seems to be risking a bit much to me to be worth it. The reason Russia would have to give up basically his life is that he would have to use Bothnia to support this move up, because Moscow is getting cut no matter what. And because of these 3 units here, it's certain that Moscow is dying. There's not really a question about that. So, hopefully he doesn't get that support. If he does, well played to him, like seriously well played. The downside we've got here is that we didn't go with the more aggressive moveset that we were suggesting, which was Ukraine to Warsaw, Galicia to Cilicia, which would have just decimated Germany here. There would be no way he could respond to that. He would lose Munich for sure. He would like be completely on the defensive, and we would still have a shot at Moscow unless he support held it, which that would have just been perfect. But we went for the more conservative option, which was fine. It still got us in a good position, and the biggest benefit of this, I'm going to move over to the current positions, is that, as you can see, 2 Austrian units here, we can have one support the other into Munich, and then the only way that Germany keeps this centre is if France supports Hold'em, which is good for my front. All of this so far has been good for Austria, but the reason this is good for me as well is that if that unit holds there, there's only really one logical option for protecting Marseille, unless the French player is going to go all out and go, I'm not defending Marseille, I'm just going to hope he doesn't go for it, which would be crazy given Austria has tapped it every single turn. This leads to a couple of other things. The only really reasonable move for Western Med in that circumstance is to support hold Tunis here. Belgium can't really do anything because it's blocked in here, so it might get convoyed up to London, it might go to Ruhr, probably does go to Ruhr. Might even just stay in Belgium, if he doesn't trust Germany enough. But we'll see how that goes. And obviously there's probably some combination of this happening too, just to guarantee France one of those two centres. But now if you look at what's happened here, from this one move here, this one support hold, that has to happen in order for them to keep Munich, we've basically inferred the entire French moveset. That's something great you can do. You can, like, predict all of this. If you want to go all in on it, you can. You can just say, okay, I think the French player will do this, let's just do the best move against this. In this case, that actually makes sense, because if France doesn't do this, we get a huge advantage on this front instead. And that more than makes up for any disadvantage we would get from playing the best order set against this and him doing something else. So, let's just show you what we're intending to do here. First off, this was a move suggested by the Austrian, and which I think really smart. Piedmont support Lyon to Marseille. I really like this suggestion because not only does it work against this, it also works if France tries to do some sort of self-bounce, which is unlikely but possible still. It will pull Gulf of Lyon back into Marseille, and then we're sitting pretty. He's got a build, but he can't use it in the south because he will have covered his southern build centre here. Now, to follow up with this, we're sending the Austrian unit into the Gulf of Lyon. I'm not sure whether this will work. It might not. The biggest problem with it is that obviously it fails against something like this. If he just attacks Tyrrhenian Sea, Austria is forced to retreat, in which case Austria probably just retreats to Tuscany, and then we're kind of good going forward. Although, I did just notice there is a potential problem there, because I'm doing this, and Austria is supporting my fleet up to take Rome, which means Italy may well retreat to Tuscany just to kill the Austrian fleet, but which would actually be pretty bad, but it's not the worst. We can recover from that because I've got so many fleets waiting in the wings over here, and he could convert that into an army, and suddenly I've got even less to worry about in terms of enemy fleets. Following up, Ionian to Naples. This is, instead of Ionian to Tyrrhenian Sea, which is a lot better if he's doing the moveset that we're predicting, we are hedging our bets a little bit, because if this got bounced out, it's not only this unit that's not moving, it's also Eastern Mediterranean, which is supposed to be moving in behind it. So we go for the guaranteed take instead, move our fleets along here so that if Tyrrhenian Sea falls, we can kick him back out again fairly easily. And of course, Aegean doesn't really have anything to do still. This is the problem with building so many fleets, they all get stuck on this bottleneck. I really want to get more units out, but as long as Austria keeps trading me centres behind him, which he's promised to do, I'm fine with that, for the time being. And hopefully I can push through here and start making gains. I think it's become a distinct possibility again with France sending this fleet north. I apologise for all the jump cuts in this one. I am not feeling amazing, so I am constantly coughing, and then presumably editing meme is cutting that out. I hope you did your job, editing meme. Anyway, the other things, on the Russian front, we are going to attack Moscow with everything. Which obviously fails against Moscow moves to Warsaw with support from Germany, but as I said, I don't think that's a huge problem. England keeps this centre, he can take the fleet off of it and use it to maintain one of his important units. And that's a decent trade-off. What we expect him to do is Moscow to St. Petersburg with support from Gulf of Bothnia, and them cutting Norway, which is a lot more reasonable from a Russian long-term survival point of view, because St. Petersburg is a center he can hold if Germany wants him to. So, the other thing we're intending to do here, Armenia to Sevastopol, give me the build. I'm really happy with this. This should even out the build count, with me going plus Rome and plus Sevastopol. Austria going plus Moscow plus Warsaw, and then minus Sevastopol, brings us both up to 8, because I'm on 6 right now, he's on 7. And since I'm behind him, and sort of have these units at his back, I'm the stronger power on 8 units, even if a lot of them are somewhat useless against him. That's how we're keeping some semblance of balance here. One more thing, I got more certain that France was pulling these moves, specifically because of one of his messages, which I want to show you here. Okay, so as you can see here, France is talking about stabbing in 05, which I'm agreeing to purely to make him more comfortable. Probably not intending to, especially with him sending his units north. Just, he'd be much more likely to solo off with that than I would, and I would like to take that opportunity to punch through his Iberian centers, which will give me the opportunity to solo. But here he's trying to rile me up by saying that Austria is being sort of prideful and boastful, and saying, Turkey won't stab me given my diplomatic acumen, which I had to look up because I'm not familiar with every English word, but Austria is basically saying, given his diplomatic skill, I'm not going to stab him, which Turkey sent to me with the plan of having me think, how dare Austria say something like that? This alliance is due to me, not to him. I should throw him away and blah 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 blah. Anyway, still not intending to, but the important thing here is right here in this center. Shocked and kind of irritated sums up my opinions of his moves as well. Was he expecting me to hold Munich for him and risk my southern defenses? No way, Jose. Munich is Austria's. So this is what France told me. He told me basically, I'm annoyed at Germany because Germany's put his hands in my fate and I can't defend him without letting my southern centers go. So the way he says this, I'm pretty sure it's him saying something deliberately to try and get me to feed that information to Austria, because he has to consider that I'm still working with Austria here. He has to have that on his mind. And the best way to get myself and Austria to do suboptimal moves here is to trick us into thinking he's doing something different than he actually is. And of course, by saying he's not supporting hold Munich, then if I feed that information to Austria think we both think that France is not defending Munich, so we go for Munich, we don't bother going for Marseille, we miscalculate down here, he makes progress. I'm pretty sure that's the intention of this message. So I've basically taken it to mean exactly the opposite of what it says. I've taken it as further confirmation that he's doing this. Maybe I've been tricked. Who knows? We'll see. Also, turns out all of my bad feelings last round weren't important. They didn't matter. It was just that Austria was at work. But it shows you how easy it is to get paranoid in this game, especially when you're in this Austria-Turkey alliance, right? It's not an easy alliance to think that it will go a long way, especially when it looks like you're going to run up to a stalemate line. But hopefully it's going to go further than I thought it would. We'll see. And this is me as Turkey. I can't imagine how Austria is feeling. I'm very glad he hasn't turned around. You have to find a very specific kind of Austria to do that, but I think I read the room correctly at the start in finding that Austria. So I'm going to chalk that success up to me. With massive props to him for going through with it. Not really much else to talk about. I did discuss potentially tricking Italy into trying to make this convoy, but I think both me and Austria think it's not likely to work, so it's not worth doing. Especially since this phase in particular we're not looking to put our fleets in the position to take Tunis anyway. We're busy doing other things, like breaking through Lyon. Interesting question, why is getting into Lyon such a big deal? Well, he's only got 2 fleets right now, so getting into Lyon forces him to self-bounce in Spain for at least 1 phase. And that 1 phase could be enough for us to get into position to break through. Even if it isn't, in order for him to defend Tunis properly, he will have to bring essentially Western Med down to North Africa so it can't be cut by Gulf of Leon in the fall turn when we have units in Tyrrhenian Sea, Ionian Sea, and Leon. Hopefully it works out. We'll see how it goes. I'll see you next round. Right, so here we are, spring 1905. You might be able to hear, I hope you can't. The UK has been battered by Storm Dennis over the weekend, so there is quite a lot of wind at the moment. But this seems to be a lull, so I'm going to quickly do the recording now and hope that it doesn't come back. Anyway, so a few phases have progressed since last time. Autumn 1905 and autumn 1904 went through, so did retreats and builds. Going to show you them here. No, I'm not. This is the wrong page. Alright, I'm back. Organisation skills, yeah. Right, this is the result of fall 1904, as you can see. Some interesting things to note. It didn't go exactly according to plan, as you can see here. Lyon did not cover Marseille, Burgundy did, so we didn't get into the Gulf of Lyon, which is really sad on my front. But because we had this sort of 2-pronged attack where we were attacking 2 things and one of them was guaranteed to work, well, they weren't if France didn't cover Marseille, but we assumed they would. We did get into Munich, so that is a huge result for Austria. It's not so good for me, because it means this front has been pretty severely broken through before I'm even close to getting to these Iberian centres, but it should be able to help progress. Go away, Vera. Important things to know. England's convoy back to London. Not sure if it's a good move here. I would probably have just put York in London. But what this does do is protect against potentially Liverpool going to York and France having this position on London very, very quickly. But yeah, the most interesting thing about this phase is just that we got into Munich here. We did get into Moscow, Russia got pulled up to St. Petersburg. We expect that Russia will be allowed to survive there in return for giving Germany support through to Norway. Aside from that, not a huge amount to talk about. No progress here. We did get the centre here, I got the centre here, so I got 2 builds out of that, and so did Austria, because he got Munich, Warsaw, and Moscow, and only lost Sevastopol. France got 1 build, but France has a bit of a strange situation here now of what to do with that build, because there's 2 fronts that are vulnerable, the southern front with the fleets here, or the northern front with Burgundy in particular being completely open. And while he can protect Burgundy with Belgium, if he does, he's leaving himself open to the English fleet up here. Which is why England being alive is so important. We'll get back to that in a second. Let's go to builds. So, as you can see, I did end up building an army. I talked to Austria about this, and he was okay with it. I'm not sure whether he should have been okay with this or not. I think in a Turkey-Austria alliance, there's a lot of sort of strange negotiations where you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be okay with this, but in order to make this alliance work, I have to be. The reason for this army, from my perspective, is it makes it slightly easier to stab Austria if I need to. The reason I gave him was just for security reasons, because right now he's got a huge, overwhelming amount of armies, and the only centres I can protect, really, are the ones on the coast, and these Russian ones up here, except probably can't hold the Russian ones for long if he does stab me. So I had to portray that in a way that I wasn't questioning his integrity. So I just mentioned it. Here we go. For builds, you've got Fleet Smyrna, obviously. Yeah. I haven't put in builds yet, trying to think what would be best here. Fleet Smyrna is a given. What are your feelings on the other one? So, presenting it to him as his decision. You know, I'm right behind you if you want to do something like make me build an extra fleet, except I'm going to present my perspective on it.
I think whatever it is, pretty irrelevant in terms of actually advancing. It's stuck behind 2 more fleets in the queue through Ionian, which is absolutely true. It wouldn't have much of an impact, being the the 6th Turkish fleet on the board and the 7th in our vast armada here. So I think I'd prefer 1 more army just for security reasons, assuming Ukraine and Sevastopol are going to be headed further away from my home centres in coming years. So it's sort of like, just sort of off mentioning, yes, I need it for security, not outright saying I don't trust you or anything. It's just a reasonable option, and then present why that's a reasonable option in that Ukraine and Sevastopol are moving away. I just want this 1 army so that I can have some degree of security. He did acquiesce to that. He said, as for builds, I can definitely see we're entering the phase where we actively need to talk about how we're going to see this through. Stab in either direction would be weak at best. That's very true, actually. I don't think I can effectively stab from this position. I don't really want to yet anyway. I think the only case I am actually going to stab is if I need the points at the end of the game, or I see a solo opportunity for myself, or if I see a solo opportunity for him and need to put a stop to that. I really like the guy, and in a lot of games I might actually give up the solo just to run the alliance through with a person like this, because like unranked games you can do things like that, but in a tournament game I don't think that's a viable option. I think you have to be open to stabbing someone, even if you really like them. So, going back to what I was saying, this 1 army doesn't actually give me much ability to stab him. It will potentially open up options later, and that's really why I wanted it. If you have 2 fleets here, I've still only got the 2 armies on the board. I've got 6 fleets, which can only really attack Greece and potentially Trieste and Venice here, if I need to turn on him. So I really need to start building up my army units a little bit more, just having something that's not a navy. So, he agreed to that. I think he's being a lot more open to stuff like this than most Austrians would, which is why this alliance is working so well. Might turn out badly for him, might turn out really well. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so another thing we found out, Germany wants to cut a deal to be part of the draw. I don't know how seriously I want to take this. I haven't heard much about this yet, but that sounds really promising. What I think could have happened is Germany is really annoyed that France did not support Holdhim in Munich. As I heard from France last round, where was it? Was he expecting me to support Hold Munich for him and risk my southern defence? No way, Jose, Munich is Austria's. That's not exactly a friendly way to negotiate with the German, especially if France is being aggressive about and saying you were an idiot here or something like that. Getting Germany on side would just be perfection, although it does give Austria another jump. Yeah, which is exactly why I send messages like this to Austria when we say, gonna make a good run at 17-17, but plan ahead. Say stuff like, we only need to trade 1 centre for every 2 you gain if I'm not gaining any, so you could go +6 and all we'd need to trade is Greece and Moscow/Warsaw. Obviously, I'd prefer to take things like Moscow and Warsaw over Greece, because Greece I can take whenever I want to, but we can negotiate into this. The reason... A key reason this alliance is working so well is that we're looking ahead, we're saying, okay, we can trade centres here, we can trade centres here, we can keep ourselves level even though I'm getting stuck and not getting any centres. Austria is feeding me centres so that I stay level with him. Huge props to him, because that's preventing any kind of want for me to stab him at the moment. So hopefully, even if Austria just completely decimates this German front, I'll still be fine. I'll still be taking centres and keeping on par with him. But hopefully what that means is we'll get some degree of support around this area and be able to break through more quickly. So we'll have to see how that goes. Not a lot to report right now. In terms of actually planned moves, I've only really looked at the south down here so far. My suggestion was this. As you can see, this is a bit risky. Obviously, we've got this potential here, which sort of just stops everything in its tracks and means we don't advance at all. You would think that the solution to that would just be to move up to Tuscany, right? And then you've advanced somewhat and have some units on the Gulf of Leon here. But that's a problem because potentially he could just take Tyrrhenian Sea even from this direction. And then, yes, we've got Tunis, but he's got a fleet up here that can attack Italian centres and such, and it just gets a bit awkward with him actually in Tyrrhenian Sea. I'd prefer for that not to happen. There's also obviously the possibility of this, but I don't think he's likely to do that. So my very slightly better option that I'm going to propose, well, that I have proposed, is this, which obviously keeps him out of Tyrrhenian Sea if he does go for this attack and gives us Tunis. But more importantly, if he just does this, and for example we don't take Tunis and don't advance at all, what happens is Naples dislodges Tyrrhenian Sea gets a retreat, Tyrrhenian Sea retreats to Tuscany, and then we have advanced our position. So once again, it's that double move I've been talking about. There's been a surprising number of opportunities to use it, and we haven't used it yet, so hopefully this is the time. Other things that we need to do, obviously support hold Piedmont here. This move right here is incredibly likely. I think this is the most likely combination of orders down here. So we can't really afford to lose Piedmont because that's an important province on this front, specifically for taking Marseille. So up here we're probably looking at doing something like this, just to get that Cilician unit out of the way, and probably something along those lines, although we'll have to talk about that in negotiations because I doubt Austria will just want to give up Moscow. There's also not really any point in attacking St. Petersburg because this is going to be here next turn. But what we could potentially do is get England to tap it on the next round. And then we could take St. Petersburg. And if we do take St. Petersburg, that's a huge advantage because this army comes off the board because that's the Russian army and Russia will have lost their centre. Which means we can slip into Finland. There's nothing defending this area once Sweden is in Norway. And start pushing over the north here, which are centres we couldn't otherwise get to without a fleet. The other thing very quickly that I'm going to talk about, England's harassing tactics over here. We're expecting something along these lines, probably this actually, where Holland gets supported in. This forms some kind of a stalemate, but if England can convoy this unit into somewhere like Holland, then we've got a huge advantage, because this army, not only are we keeping England alive with it, we're also getting a unit behind their backline, and that can help support Munich into Kiel, it can help support Munich into Ruhr, it can help, well, it can tap Belgium if we wanted to cut something, I'm not sure, but it could tap Kiel if we were going for Berlin. It's just generally a huge unit to have on our side, and that's why having someone behind their lines is so important, so ridiculously important. So I'm glad England's still alive. Hopefully he'll stay alive a bit longer, we'll have to find out. I think France should do this, but it's very likely he gets greedy and tries to take London with it, or take North Sea with it, like so. In which case we'll have the advantage down here. There's no way he can get a unit here fast enough. The other potential thing is, attacking London like this, but then obviously he leaves Edinburgh open, so he hasn't got many options for killing the Brit. Which is why we need to put all this pressure on him immediately. Anyway, I think I've rambled for way too long, so I'll probably see you again next phase. Might have some updates this phase but this is mostly just a tactical exercise at this point. There's no way we're getting Russia or Italy on our side, so the only real negotiations right now are trying to trick France that I'm about to stab Austria, which is going okay. I'll get you updated on that later. And listening out for what's happening with this German flip. Hopefully he does flip. Okay, I am back very briefly. It is still the same phase in spring 1905. As you can see here, I've got the preview map up. I should turn that off. We've still got another 9 hours because the deadline slipped a bit, but this is a late night update from me. What I really wanted to talk about here is just how effective this Austria-Turkey alliance has been, mainly due to the fact that it's an Austria-Turkey alliance. To some extent, this would have happened regardless of what countries we were. We are two players who've sort of vibed very well. We got off to a good start with each other, sort of decided we'd be allies to each other, and then worked together solidly throughout the game and came up with plans and talked through those plans, just generally talked a lot, built up that level of trust. I think mainly because it's an Austria-Turkey alliance, that level of trust has skyrocketed up to a point that it would not have done with most other alliance combinations. I've seen that with, like, Italy-Austria sometimes. If you have an alliance that swaps over the home centres, sometimes you can, like, make all sorts of things work with Kilopantos and such like, where you're forced to go in with each other, like all in with each other off the bat, and as a result, if that alliance sticks, it's really, really strong because you both really know you can trust the other one. I've had plenty of opportunities to stab. I haven't taken them. They weren't great opportunities to stab, but they've landed me more points than I currently have or am looking at getting if Austria were ever to turn on me. The fact that I haven't done so, the fact that Austria also hasn't done so, has solidified our alliance to the point that we can do stuff like this. And I've talked through my tactics here. I specifically sent him screenshots of the moves I wanted to do, or I thought were the best moves for us as an alliance. Although with a big disclaimer, I'm trying to think if there's anything better we could do with the Warsaw-Moscow front, and then up here, I also said, only way to do it is Moscow to Livonia, Sevastopol to Moscow, which puts me in your centre, and saying that that's awkward. Just generally saying, you know, you don't have to accept this if you don't want to, but if we're really, like, locked into this alliance, and we want to push as fast as we can, it's something we can do. And what that thing is moving Sevastopol up into Moscow, Moscow to Livonia. Basically putting myself into a centre to make sure we have this position on St. Petersburg right now. Because he's not going to move Baltic up. That would not be sensible here, because his homeland's under threat. So, the only unit that's going to be able to defend St. Petersburg is this unit here that's going to move to Norway. If England can cut that unit in the fall, which there is a significant possibility of, we can push our way into here, but if we don't get into position right now, he is going to lose this unit, and then we will not be able to break through St. Petersburg. So, doing this right now is important. It puts me in the Austrian centre. The main reason this is so incredible that Austria is agreeing to this is that I am also making this move into Galicia to defend, basically, against this German unit. He obviously could do this instead, and then we don't have to have this unit here. But this gives us a little more security on Munich. It lets us move our units up this way, potentially. It's just a little bit better in general. It also gets this unit out and potentially onto the front line. It requires incredible Austrian trust. And the fact that he's agreed to it, I'm just so happy with this alliance right now. And it's kind of that's giving me, like... maybe it's just 1:30 AM thoughts, but I really don't want to stab this guy. Even if it requires that I lose the tournament for this stab. I think I probably will end up stabbing him if I can get a solo, regardless, but I'm gonna feel really, really bad about it. In any other game that wasn't a tournament, I would not stab this guy. That's just my style of play. In a non-anon, I also wouldn't stab this guy because it helps to build up a rapport that you're a good, trustworthy ally. But in an anonymous tournament, I kind of think you have to. That's a garbled mess of thoughts. He's also just so excited about everything. That's what's really killing me. Let's do this. Apologies for the expletive. I'm so excited. That's what I really like to see in an ally. And I don't really want to crush those hopes and dreams. I guess I'll find out in a few weeks whether I'll end up doing that. You guys will probably find out in a couple of hours. Maybe less than that. Okay, so here we are. Spring 1905 retreats. So you can see retreats have not gone through yet, but I've gone ahead and put them in on the backstabber sandbox because there's only one, and it's pretty much guaranteed. The only other option is to disband. Well, that was a disappointing phase, to say the least. We lost every single guess that we could have possibly lost. This one down here wasn't really a guess so much because there wasn't another thing we could do that was better. But France still did the right thing there and protected Tunis, so we didn't make any progress apart from getting into Tuscany. Up in the north, as you can see, Russia bounced us in Moscow, which we could have prevented with a support up, but we supported to Livonia instead because I was thinking that might be where they would bounce. If I'd have put a little bit more thought into it, probably would have been able to predict that, because Russia risks a lot by moving into Livonia here if Moscow just taps St. Petersburg, whereas Russia doesn't risk anything by moving down, but I just jumped to the assumption that he would be supporting Sweden to Norway, which I shouldn't have done. If we'd have put Warsaw support up to Moscow here, we would have had a shot at taking St. Petersburg this turn, provided England was willing to cut Norway for us. But now, England is probably dead by the time we get into position. The other misguess here, convoying England over to Holland when the vacated centres were Denmark and Belgium, overall probably doesn't make that much of an impact because he would have been knocked out of Belgium immediately had he gone there and had to disband his unit because he would have lost London as well. But if he'd have convoyed into Denmark, or even if he'd have convoyed into Belgium, it would have given us a little bit of an edge in that fight because these units would be distracted and we would be able to coordinate to some degree with England. The fact that he's stuck in his homeland means we can't do anything to help. We just have to hope that he survives another year, which he can do by cutting one of Liverpool or English Channel here, but he has to guess correctly. He can't just support hold London because Edinburgh will just cut it. Edinburgh will always cut North Sea this turn. So if you look forward to what position that puts us in, again accounting for this retreat down here, it's not a good one. The reason for that, this is stalemated, pretty much. Even if we get Warsaw up to Prussia now, we've got 3 on Berlin, he's got 3 defending Berlin, he can just do this. And nothing else needs to be defended because it's all only attacked by 1 unit. It just needs a unit in the province to defend it, which they have got with Ruhr and Burgundy here. So this front is entirely locked. As you can see, support hold here keeps St. Petersburg as long as England isn't interfering, and England right now has to focus on his own survival by going here or here. The only weakness in his line right now is that France has to correctly guess whether we're going to the Gulf of Lion or whether we're going to Tunis on this turn by support holding the right units here. I have a feeling he is just going to support hold Tunis, and if Lyon gets knocked back like so, he can just support hold Marseille with it, and he hasn't lost anything here. He will have to pull a unit back, which he can't do immediately if he wants to take London, but he is going to get a build, most likely, so he can just put a fleet here or an army here, move it down to here, and then he's freed up the Spain unit to support hold Western Med. He's got another fleet coming down in English Channel. Just generally, it's a bad spot. This can get stalemated really easily. If he manages to hold Western Med, which we can't take anytime soon here, he can just use Spain to support hold Marseille, and if he gets a unit down through to North Africa, he can just use that to support hold Western Med, plus another fleet in the Mid-Atlantic, and that just seals up the line. There's a few more stalemates he can get a little bit further back. They would be harder for him to get into position for, but he's got more time to do it, so it's a trade-off on that respect. I don't think we're going to get through into these Iberian centres. I think this is all blocked off as well, and I think this is all blocked off, so we're out. We can't make any more progress than we currently have. We could if someone slips up, but I'm not going to count on that. And because of that, I've been thinking all this morning about how exactly I want to do this, but I think the moment I saw the moves had gone through, I knew this is the moment I have to stab. So let's just go over why I would want to stab here first. First thing first, the main point of the alliance play here was to get me, for me, was to get me over the stalemate line and get me into a position where I can make a run at 18 centres. As is, that's not possible. The only person across the line is Austria right here, and this centre is gone the moment Austria has to disband anything on this front or get stabbed or anything like that. That centre's never mine. The Iberian centres, as we know, we could push them back a bit. Tunis is not an 18th centre, it's on the southern side of the line, so can't count on that one either. So really, the alliance play, the whole point of it has come to an end, and if we look at my position right now, it's probably the best I'm going to get in terms of stabbing someone. I can potentially convince him to support me up into Moscow. I may need to offer him something in return, maybe free passage into Rome or something with that, which I could then hold and not let him in. But I've got this centre for free potentially, especially if I can get him to move out of Warsaw like this. I've got this unit in Galicia, this is the main reason. I've got free access to his home supply centres. Specifically, Budapest is probably the one I'd go for, just because it's easier to consolidate my units around that front. If I go to somewhere like Vienna, yeah, sure, I take Vienna, I probably get knocked out of it pretty quickly. Looking at it, maybe that is the better choice. But safety reasons, just making sure he's not defending it, this is probably the better stab point to go, even though I'm pretty sure he's not going to be defending it. Third thing, I should have moved Ankara to Smyrna last phase to prepare for a convoy over to Greece here. I didn't think to do that, mainly because I didn't want to tip him off that, or I didn't want to make him feel like I was threatening him. That was a mistake, I should have done that. Even if it puts him on edge a little bit more. But instead I think I need to move this around to Armenia and get ready to support on the Russian front. The other centre I can obviously take off of him is Greece. Just by doing this, it would have been better with a convoy, but it still works with not a convoy. So this altogether puts me +3, it puts Austria -3, and this is why you don't dot when you stab, why you don't just go for one centre. Because when you go for one centre, you go up 1, he goes down 1. You've got a difference of maybe 2 in total, and then you get the force of your ally coming back for revenge when they're not particularly weak. In this case, he's being crippled by this move. He's got nothing here to defend. He's basically out the moment I hit him, and all his units are along this front line, which means it's going to take him time to get them back to the positions he needs to. I may well get knocked out of Moscow. There's a very good possibility I get knocked out of Moscow with Russian support after this. But the fact that I gain it temporarily and make Austria take units off the board is important even if those units come off this front. Obviously, I go +3 from this. That's huge because right now my main weakness is lack of armies. I can just stick 3 armies on the board. Ideally, I want a unit still in Aegean to start convoying over into this area. I do want to put a unit into Adriatic just to give me extra positioning on his home centres, which means I will not have a unit in Ionian, but that's okay, I can deal with that. Tuscany is probably going to be a unit he takes off the board after this, probably Piedmont as well. So I'm not too concerned about the Italian front. My main concern here is that since I'm stabbing him, he's going to be incredibly angry at me and probably want to throw the solo to someone else. So my main concern is to make sure he doesn't have the ability to do that, which means taking as many centres from him as fast as possible, which is what this stab is about. It also means talking a lot to Germany about countermeasures to this French front here, because France is the big threat. France is the person Austria could try and gift centres to, especially around Munich. But the moment that starts happening, Germany should turn around and start fighting France. And Germany is in a good enough position where I think he can hold back the French front for long enough. I also have enough fleets here so that I can probably guarantee that France can't take Tunis anytime soon. Might be a mistake, but we also have to remember we're on a 5-year time limit here after this point, so that's going to be a bit of a stretch for France to reach that in time. And hopefully England can... I think it's going to be Yorkshire going in, for sure, because otherwise it puts this fleet too far away from where it needs to be down here. So if I just recommend England cuts this unit, France shouldn't be getting a build. That sets him back a little bit more. I'm assuming I'm keeping my commentary from last night, regardless of how gobbledygooky it is, because it gives some context to this. I'm not happy about stabbing the Austrian. I really like him as an ally. You can see through our press, well, I've been showing you throughout, that I'm really enjoying working with him. He's like, damn, that's a big risk for me, let's do this, I'm so excited, yada yada yada. Sounds like a plan, thanks for sticking with me this far and into the future. I almost hope this brings changes to how the savages of Nexus view the game and what a good alliance is. This is a really good alliance, and in most games, I might just stick with him. I probably would stick with him, because I really like him. But you have to be brutal when you're playing this game at a high level. You can't just sit on your laurels and, well, rest on your laurels and think, yeah, sure, I'll take less points so that I can give my friend more points. Unless you're playing non-anon, but that's a different story altogether. You have to take what advantages you can get, and that's what makes this game diplomacy, really. It's not fun, but it has to happen. Hopefully, well, he is going to be angry, there's no question about that. But hopefully he'll see why I had to do it. I'm not going to try and, like, do the whole thing where, yeah, we could work together later, yada yada. I respect him too much for that. But, man, it's painful. It's really painful. But that's what this game is sometimes, and you just have to take the stab at it. Obviously, I'm not going to win, but I need to increase my sum of squares score to the point that this game is well worth it for me overall across the Nexus. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this. Again, it comes down to when is it good to stab. This is a perfect moment to stab, really. There's not going to be a better opportunity than this, so I'm going to take it. And we'll see how that turns out. Oh, one more thing. Press. It's important to consider when you're stabbing, the number one read people can get on you on stabbing is when you change your press style. When you start talking less, that's the main one. Where you start going into less detail about what you're going to do going forward, that's another big one. So when you're stabbing someone like this, especially when they're a quite savvy player that talks a lot, you need to make sure you keep up appearances. You need to make sure you keep discussing options with them. You need to make sure you keep discussing your plan going forward, even though you're not intending to stick to it. This was painful to write. I think people just don't see long-term alliance play as a thing online. I'm convinced it's the best way to play this game. And interesting, blah blah blah, that's just like personal touch. I'm gonna have to discuss with him what we're doing here, where we're attempting to punch through, all the while knowing I'm going to stab him in the back. But yeah, just that's one of the main mistakes people make, even at a high level, just changing your press style when you're about to stab. Don't do that. Always just keep up your press style exactly the same as you're thinking of stabbing them. Act as though you would not. Act as though you're just going to do the same moves going forward. That can be tough, but it pays off. Alright, I'll see you when this goes through. Hopefully. Hopefully it all goes well. Yeah. Okay, so here we are. As you can see, still autumn 1905. The phase has not gone through yet. We've got the retreats in, which, as I said, would happen. Austria went to Tuscany, really the only option, unless he wanted to take it off the board, which wasn't reasonable here. I've made my mind up to definitely stab. During the retreats phase, and a little bit after, Austria and I had a discussion where he was very clearly seeing the danger, I think. Where is it? Here. Yeah, that was rough. I see a stalemate forming here. I'm unsure we're going to be able to break. I'm not sold on it myself yet, and it's a bit lame, but we could potentially negotiate a draw. So he was basically suggesting we finish the game here. And I think that's because he looked at the board state and saw that if this stalemates, I've obviously got an easy attack on him, and he has not really got anything equivalent on me. He has to pull his units back from the front line to do that, and then he's going to get swarmed by German and Russian and French units. So, when he sent me that message, it sort of told me, yes, he knows I'm going to stab at some point. I kind of need to do this now. I was pretty much already had my mind made up on it, but this was a certain. So, what I had to do from here was make sure that I'm still talking like I was previously, saying stuff like, I don't think we're entirely stalemated yet, making a plan. This is quite an in-depth plan here. Talking through options, joking around like I usually do. And additionally, here's the main plan. You can pause and read it all if you want to. The main important bit for me is here where I suggest Livonia supports Sevastopol to Moscow in return for Rome. And he basically agrees to this. He thinks this is the best plan too, because that's the one I've been pushing. Hopefully he is actually agreeing to it. There's some high chance that he's going to defend himself against a potential stab here, especially considering I think he sees it coming in the long run, if not immediately. But the idea is, since he's going to think he's getting Rome for Moscow, he's going to let me into Moscow here, specifically by supporting his unit up, and then I take the center off him, and I don't give him Rome. It's the easy way to correct for the positioning advantage that I'm going to lose by not having Ankara in the right place. Unfortunately, I'm going to immediately lose Moscow. I could have told him to do this, which would have been ideal, but I think that telegraphs too much that I'm going to stab him. I'm basically telling him, okay, all your units need to go to the front line, and all of my units will just sit here happily behind you, waiting to stab the knife in. Yeah, no, he's not going to accept that, regardless of how much we've been working together. I think he's a good enough player to realize this. I think there was an interesting article published quite recently on the Web Diplomacy Forum. I think it was today, actually. If I go here, civility gets you stabbed, by Swordsman 3003. He is an excellent diplomacy commentator, article writer. He goes under the name Brotherboard.
I strongly recommend you check out his site, which is brotherboard.com. Lots of fantastic articles. I've been a guest writer on it once. Very much enjoyed it. Overall, fantastic diplomacy play. And here, this one is about top 5 reasons you get backstabbed. Number 3, civility. It's basically saying you're letting your ally have too much power over you throughout. You're playing like a Care Bear, and you believe your ally is a Care Bear, but you're giving them all the control. And this is basically what Austria has done here. It's kind of bad timing for me, because if my ally reads this, maybe he reconsiders what he's doing. But we'll talk about that a bit more later. But overall, should probably be fine. The main thing I have to decide upon is exactly how I perform this attack. Initially I said Galicia to Budapest, just because it's safe. I think Galicia to Vienna is much, much better, because it requires him to knock it out, which requires 2 units on that front to attack it. And that's actually quite difficult for him to do without getting all of his units all the way around it first, which takes a little while and lets me have some time to get my units into position. Obviously the problem here is either that or that, just him covering Vienna. I don't think he's going to do that, because it seems quite obvious that I would just go to Budapest. So I'm actually tempted to go with the more aggressive option and go to Vienna. Budapest is nearly as good, but the fact that he can just immediately move Trieste, Vienna on the next turn after that makes it a little bit worse, I think, to go to Budapest. There's also the key of what to do down here, around Greece. I think I'm sending Aegean to Greece and this one up to Adriatic. I'm debating on Adriatic, purely because my Italian front is where I'm weakest. And leaving 2 fleets there is a bit risky, because France has this line here, and Austria is probably going to help France once I do this. 2 fleets is not going to be enough to hold back the Austrian armies, the fleet here, these 2 fleets as well. Even if the Italian is neutral, which they are in this conflict. Doesn't help me very much once these come through. So I think I need to convoy an army over here as quickly as possible, which ideally means having fleets either in... Well, this needs to go up to Aegean, pretty clearly, because this is an important province for convoying through. But ideally I need something in Ionian to convoy through as well. And the only option I have for that, if I'm doing this, is either moving Greece back out on the next turn, which is fine, and I like that, but it's slow. I'm not getting those units into Italy fast enough, and I have a feeling that I will be really far on the back foot by that point. Or I just keep this unit here and convoy straight across on the next turn. I'm just debating on that, because can Adriatic do much of importance from here? It can harass Austrian armies here, it can sort of help out this army that's on its own in northern Austria. But is it worth not being able to convoy? Yes, probably, because I think what I'm likely to do is build 2 armies, send one of them across to Greece in the first phase, while moving the fleet back out to Ionian, and then convoy the second one across in the second phase. But I still think it's weak on the Italian front. I think that's dangerous. Now, obviously this is what's happening on the Russian front here. He's still going to have 2 units on Moscow. He does have to choose 3 units to disband, which is important, because all of these units are important. He's probably going to take Russia off the board, Prussia even. Probably going to take Munich off the board, maybe Piedmont, maybe Tuscany, something like that, just disband his front line. But even that helps a little bit on my part, especially if Germany then turns on France. We'll have to see how it goes. I think I'll get like Serbia for free immediately after this. I should be able to mobilize the armies fast enough to be able to take some significant amount here. Long term, not sure this is a great idea still. I still think France is likely to gain a lot out of this if Austria just decides to throw things to them. But if it gets Germany moving against France, maybe that counterbalances it enough. I'm just not prepared to, like, give up and four-way draw here. After the momentum start to this game, I would not be happy with that at all. So, gotta make a move. Sorry, Austria. Hopefully you don't hate me too much after this. We'll see how it goes. The one last thing is France sending me messages here saying, you know, getting a little bit angry about me not stabbing Austria. Germany not having sent me any messages for a long time and having no communication with him. That's bad play, just generally, not talking to people. But in this case, there's a very specific intention behind it. Right now, I think it's important that I don't give away to France or Germany that I'm going to stab Austria. Don't give them any ammo to work with against me, because I need to make sure that Austria does not turn around. And the number one thing people can use as ammo is copy-pasted messages. If you write something down, you tend to have a writing style, people can tell that it's yours. If those messages get copy-pasted back to your ally, that can be a problem. Sometimes they trust you enough, but I don't think it's worth it. And I don't think tipping off France that I'm going to be attacking Austria here helps me at all. So, I'd much prefer him to be on the defensive, say support holding Tunis or something, and we'll see how things go from there. Last but not least, Tuscany is supporting Tyrrhenian Sea through to the Gulf of Lion. I have to decide whether I want to try for that or not. Don't get me wrong, knocking back France a little bit would be great, but not having control over the Tyrrhenian Sea could be a problem in being able to defend Italy at all. Obviously nothing on Rome. I think I lose Rome anyway, so maybe it's not such a huge problem. So yeah, I think I will take the support to Lyon just in case he is doing this. If I knock this back, it's well worth it. Getting those French units a little bit out of the way is going to be helpful. The problem is then, obviously, can't bounce anything. Gotta take a risk on that. Hopefully, France does not do that. That would ruin my day. I think I've talked through everything there is to talk about. Gotta hope this stab goes well. Exciting times. See you next phase to see how it went. Okay, here we are, spring 1906. That was the big turn, and as you can see from the board here, or rather, let's go to the backstabber board here, that was successful, the stab. I went +3, I did chicken out of going to Vienna at the last moment, because I was just debating, I think getting those 3 builds, like ensuring I get as many builds as possible is more important than a slight positional advantage. But aside from that, on my part, everything went perfectly. I got this centre, I got this centre, I got Greece as well. I got into the places I wanted to get into. Austria did not take Rome. There was some confusion on what he was taking Rome with anyway, so it turns out he wouldn't have taken Rome even if I had moved out. But the important part is he just didn't take the province, so I went +3. And unfortunately he did not issue the support for Tyrrhenian Sea to Gulf of Lion that we talked about, because of that aforementioned confusion. So I've still got these 2 French fleets on this front, which is irritating, but potentially manageable. The most annoying thing about this situation is this English fleet here. I told him exactly what he needed to do to defend. I told him go to English Channel. It's 100% supporting, and he just went to Belgium anyway and got bounced out. I assume maybe France tricked him into thinking Belgium would be open somehow, said, you know, if you want a place to stay, Belgium, I'll let you into Belgium or something. I have no idea. I would not believe that for a second. But it's what he decided to do, so England is out. There is now no power in the north that can get us across that line, or get me across that line. With regard to the potential solo, yeah, I've pretty much counted it out. I don't think it's going to happen. That said, Austria's reaction to this stab was actually really interesting. As you can see here, I haven't been talking as much as I should have been, I think.
But this was the message I sent immediately after the stab. The number one thing you want to think about is damage control, because obviously the biggest problem with having stabbed someone who's that close to you is that they'll feel their number one priority in the game becomes revenge. You want to try and stop that from happening. You want to try and make their number one priority become either, survival points-wise, or for them just to give up. Which is much preferable to them throwing everything at you. Or occasionally, maybe they won't. They'll just try and help you solo anyway, which is what Austria is telling me he's going to do here, but we'll get to that in a second. I know it won't mean much, but I do want to say sorry about this. You're genuinely the best ally I've ever had, and I really, really wanted to get to that 17-17 with you. To some extent, that's true. He's an incredibly good ally. It was painful to have to stab him, but I'm not really as sorry about it as I'm saying I am. I just want to make the impression that this was a really hard decision for me. And that I'm not being completely brutal and, murderous and horrible to him. But looking over everything, you were right, we were stalemated. At best, we could take 1 or 2 more centres that we might not have even been able to hold. So here I'm kind of pinning a little bit of the blame on him without outright saying it. Saying the fact that you raised that you needed to draw here, that we needed to draw, is what set me off and said I need to do that. If he blames himself for what happened, that's a bit of a nasty tactic on my part, but it will stop him blaming me as much, and that's what I'm looking for. I need him to not be all out against me after this, not be saying, it's your fault, I'm losing, I'm gonna take it out on you. Any other game I would have just gone with the draw, but this is a tournament game, and I don't think 25 points is going to be enough to progress, giving good reason for what I've done. It's not good enough to justify completely. It's obviously not gonna just turn him around again and say he'll say, yeah, that's fine, sure. But it's good to give your reasons and give it in a sort of empathetic way. I really didn't want to do this, but I had to. This is why. And then I hate myself so much for doing this, but if I didn't do it, I don't think I could forgive myself if it's the reason I don't make the finals. This might have been a little bit too heavy, going in too much. I think it still looks kind of genuine. It still looks genuine enough, considering how strong our alliance was. So if we look to Austria's reaction, not good. Not good at all. Congrats, I appreciate you wasting hours of my time over the last 3 weeks. That's just kind of upsetting to read, because obviously it was a good alliance. I really do like this guy, and I'm sad he's feeling this way, but at the same time, I had to make that move there. If 47 points manages to be enough for you, I'd like to sue for a draw right now so that I get to leave with something. If not, my revenge is just going to be making things a lot more miserable for the others, to include you in principle. I'm not 100% sure what he meant by this, the whole to include you in principle thing. I think he might be thinking he can't make my life miserable because of the way I stabbed him, so he's just going to make everyone hate this game. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what he means or not, because this is the same thing that happened with Italy earlier, someone threatening you with something that's clearly in your favour. If he makes things more miserable for the others, that makes me more likely to take the majority of the points, and that's what I'm aiming to do. So what I really want to do here is encourage him to do this, but at the same time make him feel like I'm considering the draw so that he doesn't take out things on me, yeah? That's the plan, and I've basically told France as well, I'll bounce my units around so you leave with a hollow solo. I mean, in my eyes, there isn't such thing as a hollow solo. If you get a solo, it's all the points. Yeah, some solos feel better than others if you've had to fight hard for them, but if I win this through him giving up, I consider that something of a diplomatic victory. I still don't think I can achieve that solo. I think he's doing the same thing. A lot of people on the Discord were also kind of hyped about this stab and saying, okay, Turkey's definitely won. I don't agree with them. We'll look at the map in a second. Yes, so I said, I'm trying to say that, yes, I'm conflicted about this, and yeah, I'm talking about, okay, on one hand, yes, I want to give you the draw, but also on the other hand, was it really worth making that stab that I'd never make, just to take a draw right now. And then here, he goes, you do know what you need to do, man, no hard feelings on my part, this is me being practical, I'm not going to waste my time fighting for maybe 8 points. I'm sorry for my earlier press, I was really upset, but I understand the value of 100 points versus 35 max. I also understand I left every centre open to you, and you made the right move per the book. That said, actions speak louder than words, and that not even being a factor, I have more games left to play, lol. So, here, I will throw you the solo mostly because I don't care anymore and partly to be an asshole. I'm not sure what to think of this. Like, in theory, this is great. If he actually is going to throw me the solo, I'm just going to accept that. I'm not sure how to respond to it in a way that's like, I really feel sorry for you, but yes, I'll take it. Because that feels wrong. And it probably will make him more likely to turn this around. But I do actually want him to do this. I do want to try and encourage that from him. So I'll have to work my press around that. This line I really am not sure about. Do I get the honor of making you kingmaker? I mean, I assume he's saying he wants to be the kingmaker and he wants that honor, but it feels like it could almost be sarcastic, at least from my point of view. So I'm a little bit worried. I'm not sure he's going to do this, especially considering his disbands. If we go forward a phase, Piedmont, Tyrolia, and Prussia, they're not exactly the most pro-Turkish disbands here. If he got rid of, say, Warsaw and Venice, and Tyrolia probably, or Bohemia, that would have been a lot more pro-Turkish. This seems pro-French right here. And this one is just the unit you disband if you want to defend your home centres. So, I'm still going to aim to do this safely and securely and try and keep as much as I can while opening up an avenue for him to throw to me if he wants to. But without leaving myself open by doing that. And the way I'm going to do that, I think, I can't hold Moscow anyway if he wants it, so I'm going to probably try and make it worth his while not to disband it by offering him support up to St. Petersburg. If he is trying to throw, St. Petersburg is key. Either that or I will ask him for support, but that's a little bit more risky because he could do this and then I actually am in a pretty bad spot up there. I much prefer to have the Moscow unit back here if it gets knocked out, which there's a decent chance it will be if he's going all out on the defensive here, or on the offensive against me. Elsewhere, I'm probably just going to mobilize. We'll get all these armies out as fast as possible. Debating on where to send Ankara. Well, sorry, no, I'm not. Ankara's going to head to probably Constantinople, but maybe Smyrna, just to set up for this convoy chain into Apulia here. The other place I want Austrian help is really here. Helping him by supporting, well, helping him help me by putting him in Gulf of Leon. Most likely France is going to do this. So if he's not cutting Rome, we can take Leon this way, and that puts me into position to take Tunis on the next turn. Which hopefully will work. But I'm also going to tap Venice just in case he's doing something like attacking Rome here. If he does go through to Rome with support from Tuscany, I will get into Venice behind him. Fleet Venice, not very useful, but it's better than nothing. Also going to try and bounce him in Vienna here. Actually, maybe taking Tiroli off the board is pro-me. It's certainly more pro-me than taking Munich off the board would have been. We'll have to see. But yeah, so this is the plan right now, with this instead of these guys attacking me. The other thing, I'm trying to play up to Germany that Austria is likely to throw to France, so that Germany turns on France here. If Germany and France work together, I get less points. That's just what that comes down to. If they're fighting each other, there's a chance I get across the line somewhere. So, that illusion won't hold up for very long, but hey, it doesn't need to, it just needs to hold up for long enough for me to push across the line, even if that means the only thing he does is like bouncing north here. If that's enough to get myself or Austria into St. Petersburg, that's huge. That's potentially the 18th centre that we need, because Munich is not going to be held. So, yeah, that's where we're at. I think overall pretty successful stab, aside from the fact that England died. But that's not my fault. I tried to make England survive that, and he decided to kill himself. I think that's potentially one of the most successful stabs I've ever done. Obviously, it's because of the way that this Austrian player plays. I don't think his play was necessarily bad. Had I been the ally he was judging me to be, it would have been fantastic play. Like, an alliance like this can sweep the board. But I am a more ruthless player than I was letting on, and that's what you always have to watch out for when you're in these kind of alliances. Always try and make sure they don't have this massive potential to stab you, and it won't be worth their while to stab you, so that you don't get stabbed. Simple as that. If you correctly judge a person's character, and manage to pull off an alliance like this without defending your backline, props to you. That's a huge diplomatic success. But always be aware, you may be misreading the other person. That's about all I have to say right now. I probably won't talk more this phase. I will talk next phase. We'll see whether the Austrian does assist me, and whether I can try and turn that into a solo. Obviously, if the Austrian does not assist me, there is zero solo chance here, because St. Petersburg is locked, this entire area is locked, even Tunis is locked, and I could get knocked back out of Italy as well, so maybe I don't even top the board if that's the case. But I'm hoping that if that is the case, Germany and France fighting will stop France from getting any kind of solo. So, we'll see how it goes. Okay, I am actually going to do one more very quick update for this round. And that update is just to say, talking to Germany here has kind of snapped me to my senses a little bit. Specifically, here, I can tell you with confidence that he is indeed working with France, and any moves he coordinates with you will be faked. He's going to shortly be figuring out what he wants me to do with the units in Germany and Holland. I agree with your assessment on Moscow. Austria and Russia are already talking about getting it back. I think your ideas look good, blah, blah, blah. So, this discussion here came from us talking about potentially the fact that Austria might be working with France here. And really, this makes a lot more sense than what Austria is telling me. Austria coordinating with Germany and France to make sure I lose as much as possible, and pretending to coordinate with me so as to get information on my moves. So I haven't really given him much information on my moves, and I had already mentioned I wasn't intending to do anything that would put me in too much risk. Specifically, I was only intending to support him up here and support him here, because these are moves that wouldn't really matter either way. Everywhere else, plan just stayed the same. Make sure you hit Austria as hard as possible so he dies quickly. However, there was one slight issue with this, which is that obviously if I enter this order here, Rome support hold Tyrrhenian Sea, if he goes for an attack like this, Tuscany support Venice through to Rome, and if France goes for an attack on the Tyrrhenian Sea, which is very, very likely if they're working together, then I have two retreats here. And because it's not Aegean that's going there, Aegean is convoying this unit over. Greece is going into the Ionian Sea. There's only one province for them to retreat to, so that's really not ideal. Now, if this is happening, I can't defend Tyrrhenian Sea. Rome gets cut, and that's the only unit that can support hold it. But I can defend Rome, and that's with the double cut maneuver. You can always prevent any attack against a unit by cutting every single unit that can potentially attack it. That means that the maximum attack strength will always be 1, because all of the supports are getting cut, so Rome can't be taken in this scenario. Then Tyrrhenian Sea gets dislodged, but Tyrrhenian Sea can retreat to Naples, so that's fine. There is still the possibility of losing Rome on the phase after that, but that requires him to just abandon Trieste, and that's fine by me.
So apart from that, just doing the general attack here. Moscow is still supporting Livonia up to St. Petersburg, because why not? But yeah, I'm going to hit Tuscany here instead of supporting it through to Lyon. It does jeopardize my solo attempt if Austria is telling the truth, but I think the likelihood of Austria telling the truth is so low as to be not worth considering, basically. The very quick other consideration is whether I should support this move, but I think I shouldn't. Mainly because if Turanian gets here, then that leaves an open spot in Naples, and that's not really great if France is in here. I can cover it with Ionian, but then I have to move something to Ionian, and ideally I want to convoy in to Apulia, so I think I prefer my fleet ending up in Naples. Alright, that's everything. Now I genuinely won't be doing another one of these until next phase, so let's see how things go. Alright, here we are. Spring 1906 retreats. As you can see up here, phase has only just gone through. So there's been a tiny bit of press after the orders, which I'll get to in a second. You can actually read it here already. But first off, I want to talk about the board. Coming to my senses with regards to Tyrrhenian Sea paid off massively for me. I did not lose Rome here. And that means I get to keep both my units. If I had tried to support Austria out to the Gulf of Leon, I would have lost one of the units and I would have lost Rome in the process, although I would have the fleet in Venice, so it's not a complete loss. As it turns out, if something sounds too good to be true, probably is. So it's a good thing that, yeah, I snapped my senses on that after talking to Germany, and that worked out alright. So I've got two retreats here. This one is pretty obvious to Naples. There's another one here in Moscow, which can actually retreat up to St. Petersburg due to the Russian unit moving out for some reason. However, I think if it goes up to St. Petersburg, it's going to be immediately knocked back out of St. Petersburg again by Germany, and I don't really want to distract Germany like that. Germany's movesets here are very, very pro-French, moving this unit up to Sweden, this unit up to Bothnia. That's way too many units in the north. He should have done kind of one or the other, and probably put this fleet back adjacent to the North Sea. And then just support holding Kiel and not even bothering going to Munich, leaving Munich for the Frenchmen. I don't think he realizes quite how powerful the French position is here. He's very possibly being deceived by center count, because right now I'm on 11 supply centers. I've obviously got the potential to grow quite a bit more if I manage to push back against the Austrian, but I don't have the capacity to get across that stalemate line. So I'm not a solo threat. France is, because France is already across that stalemate line. There's no way I can stop him taking Tunis in the long run. I can temporarily halt it by support holding Tunis here, but that's only until he gets this fleet down. And then once he's got Tunis, he can hold on to that pretty easily, and then all he needs to do is push here, and he's got his win. If Austria is working with him, it's even easier because Austria can donate him centres on the Italian peninsula. So I'm just really disappointed by these German moves, to be honest. And I think that could well result in a French solo. So, my number one priority right now, make sure that Austria doesn't throw to France, make sure that Germany realises that France is the big solo threat. Now, let's come back to the global chat in a second and look at the Austrian chat here. You're lucky I didn't take Rome. If you thought for 1 second I would ever let you walk away with a solo, not a chance, man. I'm a no better friend, no better enemy kind of guy. And yeah, this is the reaction you should expect after a stab of the magnitude that I did. This is a very reasonable response, and I don't fault the Austrian at all for responding like that. I would probably be the same way. I'm actually quite happy with his play because he's trying to do this to get all the points out of the game that he can by forcing me to draw. The problem with this approach is I'm not necessarily the one he needs to convince to draw. Yes, I'm the one who could kill him more easily, but France is the solo threat, So France is the one who has the most incentive to keep the game going, and right now Austria's moves are not going to convince France to draw at all. So, I did a little bit of lying here. I have to see if it will work out for the best or not, but here, you'll remember that last phase Germany told me what Austria was doing and it made me snap to my senses. I basically told Austria that had happened. I had orders in as said for a while, but France and Germany both told me that you were basically telling them what moves to put in. And that's it's a truth combined with a lie. It's clear that I knew what he was doing to some extent, or that I predicted what he was doing. And yes, that was mainly due to Germany. I've pinned part of it on France. And then I say to him that I'm not the person protesting the draw here. France wants you, Russia, and Italy dead before we draw. And by this, I'm kind of implying that the reason that France told me his order set was so that Austria would die more quickly, which obviously is going to annoy Austria a lot. And that's the intention. I want to get him annoyed at France. I want to make sure that he's not throwing to France under any circumstances. Now, I don't know how France is going to react to this. Obviously, he's going to try and convince Austria that he did nothing of the sort, and maybe he'll copy-paste his entire conversation log for that. I just need to make sure that I do what I can to make this lie seem believable. And it does seem very believable. But if you look at the Austrian response here, it worked, initially at least. He's obviously not happy with us. France is the bigger one. I'm very upset that he sold out my moveset, idiots. And then he talks about his requests in global chat, which I'll get to now. Here we go. France, I'm disappointed you sold out my moveset, and Turkey, I'm obviously angry about the stab. While my earlier press about throwing one of you a solo was a feint, at this point I'm unhappy enough with the players I'm playing with that I actually will throw to the person that's pissed me off the least, who's probably Turkey. So he's suing for a draw in public, which is a very effective strategy in a game like this, where you've got two major powers on both sides of the board who have a chance at soloing, because if one of them puts up their draw vote, the other one is very heavily pressured to do so as well. Because if they don't, that means that the smaller power will work with the one who has their draw vote up. And then that person can take their draw vote down, and the smaller power will still be angry enough at the other one that they'll continue working and will try to throw the solo. So I've sort of played into that. I've just said, yes, okay, sure, I'm going to put my draw vote up. And as you can see down here, I've voted to draw. You might ask, why are you voting to draw? You've still got Serbia, Trieste, Vienna, Venice. You can pick up a whole bunch here. Well, it's summer squares, so is my score actually going to get higher doing this? I think not, mainly because France is going to be expanding at the same time, taking Tunis here, and I'm going to start losing centres on the front line, specifically Rome and Moscow. Russia is going to die, which also loses me points because it's sum of squares. You lose points if a smaller power loses a centre to a larger one that's not you. And of course, Austria is going to get eliminated, and not all of his centres are going to go to me. I even think there's a very good chance that Moscow and Warsaw, if they do fall to Germany, not to me. Which is probably why Germany moved up here in the first place, to convoy across to St. Petersburg, and to get Russian support into Warsaw maybe. Although we'll have to see about that. Ultimately, I think I get the most points out of this game that I can possibly get if I do just concede and draw now. And more importantly than that, it tells Austria, yes, I am willing to draw, and France is the bad guy here. Because if I can get Austria to turn on France, that's huge. That means there's a much lower chance of France actually just outright winning this game. And that's the main thing I want to stop. Never let another player solo on you. That's a very important rule of diplomacy. I have failed that a number of times. I'm not looking to fail it here. If it does draw here, it's a bit of a disappointing conclusion. If it doesn't, it's going to be an interesting few years of social manoeuvring and trying to get Germany to realise the threat. But that should be easier if France is the one refusing to draw. I think Germany will take that as a sign that he needs to turn around. So that's it for now. I will continue probably more even this phase because I have to talk about how France reacts to the lies against him. But for now, that's all I have to say. And that's game. This is going to be the final update for this game, it turns out, because the game did draw France on getting back. Immediately put their draw vote in here. Where is it? Here we go. I just got home from work. I haven't read everything, but it seems I missed quite a lot. Full responses are on the way. I wanted to put my draw vote up ASAP, so it's sort of that dynamic where he knew everyone was going to attack him if he didn't put his draw vote up, so he had to put it up as soon as possible. He didn't want to seem like the person that Austria needed to attack, right? And I guess maybe he didn't examine the board close enough to see that Austria couldn't throw, but also maybe he just didn't want my score increasing from Austria throwing to me. If we go back to the full board here, actually on the backstabber page is easier, that is not the right backstabber page. I don't know why I keep having it open on that one. Alright, so here we are. I will just put in the retreats even though they didn't go through. These were the ones I had entered, so that we can see the final board position here. So, Austria very clearly can't actually throw to me. He can give me Vienna, Trieste, Serbia, Venice, which is probably what France was worried about. But at the same time, I'm not too upset I didn't actually take those, because the only reason I would have taken them is because I had my draw vote in. So I couldn't really expect to take them all, at least not fast enough that Germany and France wouldn't be advancing here, had I not been saying, yes, I'll take the draw. And with public draw votes, you can't lie about that. Once your draw vote is up, you're either definitely drawing, or you're counting on someone else holding out. And it's very difficult for someone else to hold out on public draw votes because of this whole everyone's going to gang up on you if you're the holdout dynamic. So am I happy with the way this game ended? The answer is yes and no. I would have vastly preferred to have pushed over the stalemate line with Austria, and I think that was possible at a point. If I could have pushed past that stalemate line, it would have been a slog, and it would have taken a while. It's debatable whether we could have made it to anything effective by 1910, but the chance was there, and given Austria was leaving himself so open, I think there was a good chance that if we pushed across the line, I could have set up a position where I could have stabbed him for the win, just straight up. The problem came with England's death, really. That was a factor we hadn't considered. How fast England was going to go down. Basically, all of our hopes for getting over this line were resting on England disrupting the back line, and France and Germany identified that and just hit him as hard as possible, as fast as possible. And that was fantastic play on their part, because that just prevented this Austria-Turkey alliance from doing anything more. There were a few tactical errors on the part of the Englishman as well. I think he could have survived longer, and that surviving longer would have given us time to push across, maybe into Spain or something similar. I'm not sure if it would have gotten us a ton further. And I can't really blame England for it, because it probably wouldn't have benefited him at the end of the day. He would have still gone down. It's just a case of whether he would have gotten revenge on the Frenchman and the German in the meantime. So, what does this teach us about alliance play, really? Well, you can have all the momentum in the world. It might not help you if the other side of the board identifies your threat level in time. In this case, Austria and I worked as this magnificent joint country that was advancing on both fronts at once, really, really quickly. Probably more quickly than most other alliances could.
that don't involve Russia, because Russia has that northern centre initially. But because it's an Austria-Turkey alliance and we're a long way back from the line, people do have time to prepare. And England leaving his backline completely open to this French stab that happened made sure that they could gain that same momentum by killing England just really quickly and setting up this defensive line along the major stalemate line. They also kept the necessary powers alive. They didn't let themselves get distracted by wanting to kill Russia or wanting to kill Italy, which was again solid play on their parts. Once they had that line set up, not much we could do, even though we managed to get all the way there by 1904, I think it was, 1905 maybe. This was when I stabbed, right? Yeah. But yeah, we were basically set up along the stalemate line by 1905, and yet we couldn't get any further than Munich. We had 18 centres between us, but that didn't matter because we're two countries, we're not one. And we didn't actually have 18 centres between us, I don't know why I'm saying that. We had 17. We could have taken Tunis given a little bit of luck and some time. Given that we got stalemated here, I'm not actually that unhappy with the outcome. Even though it's disappointing to draw as early as 1906, I think you can see here it's the 23rd. I believe I started on the 2nd. So 21 days is a very, very short diplomacy game. But I still think I got the best outcome I could possibly have gotten out of this, given we got stalemated here. As you can see, I'm not really gaining a huge amount, unless Austria deliberately lets me gain a huge amount here. I lose Moscow, I gain Serbia and potentially Trieste, but not necessarily Trieste. And then it takes me longer to push forward. France gains Tunis, unless I support hold it here, which would stop me from convoying over. And Germany was about to kill Russia, which means, according to Summer Squares, which rewards you for having a more divided board against you, I would have lost points to that, I think. In the long run, I might have gained a few, but again, there was always that risk of a French solo. Now I look at it, I'm not as sure he would have made it, just because I did have a good fleet line against Tunis, but I think he could have stalemated that, especially if the Austrian kept working with him. So unless I found a way to make the Austrian turn on him without putting my draw vote up, which I didn't, I only got the Austrian to turn on him because I put my draw vote up, or I basically said France was the holdout to the draw. I don't think I could have gotten more points than I ended up getting. I think even if I could have taken Serbia, Trieste, Vienna, I would probably have been locked out of Warsaw, Moscow until Germany took them from the north, and that would have lost me points. And France would be pushing in here, and France could potentially go for the solo, and I did not want that to happen. So, I'm taking away 43 points, because this is the only game that's finished. I am currently in the... But that probably won't be the case for long, because there are other countries doing better in other games. Still looking to get a solo in at least one of my games. Clearly not this one, but the 43 points is still going to help my average overall quite a lot. So, overall, good game. You can see the strength of momentum. You can also see the weakness of momentum, which is everyone aligning against you. Same thing that happens with the Juggernaut sometimes. You can also see that having a lot of supply centers doesn't necessarily make you this big threatening solo power. Well, you're still threatening, but there was no way I was going to get a solo out of this game, and people thinking in the Discord that I was, because I was at 11 supply centers, is something they should probably start rethinking a little bit if they're looking at the game from that perspective. You can have more supply centers than your opponent, you can make a really good stab, but you're not going to get across that stalemate line unless someone on the other side makes a mistake, is what it comes down to, or unless you have a proxy state on the other side helping you, which England surviving would have been huge. England not getting stabbed by France would have been huge. France played this really well. Massive props to him. Right at the very end, of course, getting Austria to turn on France was a pretty big move on my part. I actually did have, let me just see here. I actually did have, if you see here, a whole copy-pasted fake message chain to France, which I didn't end up having to use because France drew so quickly, but I figured France might try and convince the Austrian that he was telling the truth by just copy-pasting the message log, which is a very, very good way to tell someone, you know, I didn't say what this person is implying that I said. So, to do that, I actually copy-pasted one of France's old messages, that's not the right one, this one, and then edited it to say what I wanted it to say instead of what he actually said, which allowed it to keep that sort of style of writing that France has. So, and adding things onto the end of the message chain means that it looks like France's copy-paste, which was up to here, is the real messages. It looks like France's copy-paste is just, he's copy-pasted a section from above what I did. Which I probably shouldn't be going into this at this point because the game's over, but I kind of want to. It leads me to an interesting point with regard to convincing someone that you're telling the truth, which is screenshots. Screenshots are a very controversial issue in diplomacy in general, because a lot of people don't know how easily you can fake them. Like, copy-pasted messages, obviously someone can just take a message, edit it, or write a new message, pretend it's copy-pasted and send it. But if, say, I've got Giezo on my laptop, so here I can just do this, and take a screenshot, and then I can send this to Austria and say, okay, this is what we were talking about. Or France could do that, rather. I wouldn't want to do that because I'm trying to lie. However, there is actually a very easy way you can get around that, which is this right here, inspect element. If you inspect the element of the table that you're taking the screenshot of, which in this case is this little box here, my message, you can go into that table and you can find the actual text that has been written. And if you double click on that, hang on, let me just get some nice old replacement text here. Interesting re Austria. This is a fake message, and enter that. Here, suddenly we've got a completely different message. Same style, still looks real, and easy enough to prove. I can even copy paste more into here, for example. There we go. And I can change France's message as well. Where is it? This one? Yep. So you'll notice I'm looking at where the blue box is to tell me which box is the correct one. And the text here. So let's replace this with some of my fake France text, which would be, say, this. If the game is destined to end in a draw, then I can accept that, but saying that Austria was suiciding. And there we go. Suddenly, I've got a nice screenshot here of stuff that France supposedly said that can't possibly be faked, right? That just is faked very, very easily. So, that's my top tip from the end of this video. If you somehow manage to get through, I think it's like 5 hours at this point. I'm kind of amazed you got here. But yeah, this is a really effective way to prove someone said something that they didn't actually say. Note, if you do use screenshots, people might be angry at you, so generally avoid it. But if someone presses you for more proof after you've copy-pasted a fake message or something like that, this is a very nice method you can use. That's about everything, I think. Overall, happy with the way this game ended. Would have preferred the solo, but what can you do? Well, if you made it all this way through this video, I'm impressed. Please throw it a like if you enjoyed it. It does help the channel a little bit. And let me know whether you want to see more of these. That's one on web diplomacy, one on play diplomacy, one on conspiracy, and one on backstabber. I may record just this one. It was quite a bit of work. But I may record all 4 of them if I find time. And if this is something you guys enjoy. And hopefully I improve a little bit on the stuttering front as we go forward. So, hope you enjoyed that game, and I'll see you in the next one.